So if we could start with your full name.
My full name is Paul Cepeda Martinez.
And can you spell that for me?
Well, Paul, you know how to spell Paul. Cepeda is Z-P-E-D-A. M-A-R-T-I-N-E-Z for Martinez.
And where and when were you born?
I was born in San Antonio, Texas on March 13, 1926.
And what branch of the military did you serve in?
Army.
And what units were you attached to?
I was assigned to D Company 506 Parachute Infantry Division. PIR, Parachute Infantry Regiment, the 101st Airborne Division.
And what years did you serve?
With the 101st, I served from August 1942, which is when I went into service, to December of 45 when I got discharged.
What rank did you attain?
Corporal, sergeant, busted again, and I couldn't hold a rank. But I later, when I went to Japan, I re-enlisted in 1947. I went to the occupation of Japan and got caught during the Korean War. So that's where I made my staff sergeant rank, because I was DI for some of the guys that went to Korea.
And what medals were you awarded?
Well, the first one I got was the Purple Heart. But, and then the operations, theater of operations in Europe, and the Good Conduct Medal, the later the Victory Medal, the Occupation Medal for Germany, the Defense Ribbon for America, and 3 foreign decorations, 3 countries: the French Croix de Guerre, the Belgium Croix de Guerre, and the Holland Lanyard, and 2 presidential unit citations. And that's about it, other than my paratrooper wings, which are the ones that I'm most proud of, and the combat infantryman's badge.
And 2 Bronze Stars as well, correct?
Well, the two bronze, the Bronze Star and an oak leaf cluster, which stand for two of.
Great. So I'd like to talk about your childhood growing up. Can you tell me about your parents? What were their names?
Well, my dad's name was Jose Martinez. My mother's name was Rosalie Cepeda.
And your siblings, how many did you have?
Well, there was my older brother, Mingo, me, and then my sister, Terry.
Were you guys close as a family growing up?
Yeah. Yeah, we had to be. Growing up through the Depression, you know, my mother had a hell of a time by herself, because our father left us when I was 5. My sister's 3 years younger than I am, and my brother's 2 years older than I am, so we were pretty young when they left us. He went across town and started another family, so he had very little to do with us after that. So all the burden was on my mother to feed us and clothe us and stuff.
So was your mother working after your father had left?
Oh yeah.
What was she doing for work?
Whatever she could. She worked in a restaurant. She'd take in washing from the neighborhood, and that's how she survived.
Did you guys experience a lot of hardships growing up during the Depression?
Mostly, as a kid, you don't realize what really, what it really is until later on in life you start thinking, well, at that time it was this way. Um, the good thing was that a dollar went a hell of a long ways in those days. Because if you start to think, some people were working for $1 a week in those days. And our thing, like my brother and I, we made a shoe shine box, and we'd go downtown and shine shoes or get a corner for paper to sell papers, newspapers, and that's how we lived.
How old were you while you were shining shoes?
Oh, I must have been about maybe 8, 9, 10 years old.
And do you know how much money you were getting?
Oh, hell yes. 3 cents a pair of shoes. And the good thing was, every month, we would, since we were surrounded with Fort Sam Houston, and the guys from Fort Bliss, which was his cavalry unit, used to come into San Antonio. And we'd shine their shoes, and for shoes we'd get 5 cents, for boots we'd get 25 cents. So once a month we'd live like kings.
Now, would you give that money to your mother for?
Yes, what we got, we'd give her. Would go towards the house. But when you could go to the store and get 10 cents of ground meat, and you could feed the whole family, or a loaf of bread was only 5 cents. Milk was cheap. You could live on. If you got 25 cents, I could take my girlfriend to the movies. We'd buy popcorn and soda.
Now, who were some of your close friends growing up?
Well, there were 2 of my cousins that were close, more closely than anything else, and some of the guys, like Alex Ochoa and Juan. What the hell was his name? Forget his last name. And there was Carlos Santos. Joe Dominguez was a Joe Dominguez at that time. We were going to school together and stuff. There was a little Chinese kid that was in our class that was pretty close with us. Girls, I can't remember all their names. But there were some girls that were close, By close, I mean they were friends. They would help me with my studies and stuff.
What would you guys do for fun growing up? What kind of games would you play?
Spin the bottle. We had a swimming pool on the San Antonio River, which is now known as the River Walk, and down by the Pioneer Flour Mills, we had a swimming hole like a Tom Sawyer job that we had a cable to swing on and go in and drop into the water, and that's where we learned to swim. And we'd go fishing for minnow and catfish. That during the summer, sometimes we'd go up to our uncle's house, and we'd stay there a couple of weeks maybe. And there was a rock quarry out there where we used to go and use our BB guns and shoot with. And that was mostly how we grew up. Other than, like I say, sometimes I take my girlfriend to the movies. Puppy love. And school was my going to school was something else. I mean, I really enjoyed it, and I really learned a lot. And I only went as far as the 10th grade. I never, in fact, I wasn't even through with the 10th grade when I joined the Army. And the reason a couple of the other guys that went with me, because of the job and because of the economy. And we heard that in the Army you'd get paid $21 a month, so we decided that we'd go in 1942. So in 1942, in August of 42, on August 15th, I was sworn into the Army.
At 16?
At 16 years of age, yeah.
And how did you get in at 16 years?
Well, I lied about my age. I gave my brothers, my older brothers, date of birth to get in there. But when my mother found out, she didn't know what to do except when I told her that, hey, Mom, we need the money, you know. And at that time, the war was really something else. Because I remember that we were in a Texas theater when they stopped the movie to tell us that Pearl Harbor had been bombed and that a state of war with the Empire of Japan was on. The President Roosevelt talked to us. So everybody really changed their lives. I mean, the way everybody was starting to get jobs with the government and stuff. And we decided we'd go into the service, three of us.
How did that make you feel when the movie had stopped and you found out that America had been attacked?
At that time, you know, I was only 15 at that time, you know, so it didn't really sink in as to what or where. We knew where Pearl Harbor was because during our school, in geography, they taught us about different countries, and we knew all about Hawaii, you know, and stuff like that, and the world itself. So we knew more or less where it was, you know, and we could. Well, at that time, hell, I didn't know. We were watching a movie, Sergeant York was a movie we were watching. That was about the First World War. But after that, I mean, we just couldn't. People just changed overnight, and everybody started saying, "Hey, we got to back this war. We got to back up our soldiers." You know, they started mobilizing the soldiers. They changed the name of the Army Air Corps to Army Air Force. They changed that to the Air Force, you know. And we found a job, and we started working at Kelly Field. And we used to have to get up in the morning by 3 o'clock so we could be there. We'd bicycle down to Kelly Field to set up the tables for the cadets for their breakfast and stuff, and then clean up after them, and that was it. Within 4 hours, we were back home. And we got tired of that. That's the reason we joined the Army, you know. We said, hey, we can do better in the Army, you know.
Now, did your friends go to sign up as well?
Oh, yeah. Two of them. Joe Barrera and Carlos Santos. There were the two that went with me. And the only one that passed the physical besides me was Joe Barrera. So we ended up there in Fort Sam Houston, and we were there about maybe a week, something close to a week, and then they put us on a train, and there was a bunch of guys from there was one guy from Gilcourt, Texas, John, not John, but Udell Head. He was from Gilcourt, Texas. William Payne was from Dallas. Neisner and Thomas was from Schulenburg. And Charles Barrett was from the Valley. And then Alex and I were from, Joe and I were from San Antonio, and Roy Austin, he was from Beaumont, Texas, or something, someplace like that. Anyway, and there was two kids from California, from Long Beach, that were sent there. So we were all in the same train to go to Toccoa, because we had all volunteered for the Airborne.
Why did you choose
Which
the
I'll
Army?
tell you that. I'll tell you one thing. We went in, when I went to the recruiter and I told, he said, well, you have your choice. At that time, you had the choice of service, where you wanted to go, So I told him I wanted to go into the cavalry, because I've been watching these old movies from the First World War. He says, why do you want to go into the cavalry? I said, well, I like horses, And I did, we used to have a trail in at Camp Park Brackenridge. We had a trail where you could go for 25 cents. They'd give you a ride in a horse, So I told him that's the reason I want to go. He says, wait a minute, have you seen this? And he showed me a pamphlet, and the cavalry had turned mechanized. He showed me a tank and some half-tracks. I said, no, forget it then. So I started to walk out. And the guy said, well, come back here. What are you looking for action? Is that it? I said, well, yeah, that's why we want to go in, So he says, how about this? So he showed me another pamphlet. And in that one, it read, jump into the fight. And he showed a paratrooper coming out of the door. I said, hell no. That's worse, man. So he says, wait a minute, come back here. He says, you didn't see this completely. He says, look in the back here. $50 extra hazardous duty pay. I had no idea what hazardous meant. So I said, hell, that's $50 more. Well, that's better. I said, okay, sign me up. So they signed me up. So when we got in the train, they took us to a place called Toccoa, Georgia, which nobody of us knew where the hell that was. And they put this guy, Roy Austin, they put him in charge of us because he was the elder, I guess, of the bunch. And I think he had been in the service before, if I remember correctly. And we went to Toccoa, Georgia, and believe it or not, when we got there, it was at night, late at night, and it was raining. I mean, raining. And they put us in trucks, got us off the train. They put us in big old canvas-covered trucks, army trucks, and they started us into Camp Toccoa. And at Camp Toccoa, when we got to the gate, I was peeping out of the canvas, and I was looking with the headlights. I saw this big old monument there, Camp Toombs, Georgia. That was the name. And it was supposed to have been a Army tank unit that was there during the First World War. And they got shut down, and they were rebuilding the whole thing. When we went there, they changed the name right away from Toombs to Toccoa. The 1st Battalion had already been, you could hear him training when we were when we got there. The next morning, or that night when we got there, they put us into a big old, what they call a platoon tent. You could hold a platoon of men in there. And they were all nothing but cots, and it was on the side of a hill. And as we walked in there, we could see the water running underneath our cots that we were going to sleep in. It says, put your duffel bag on the cot, and you get in there and you go to sleep. We'll wake you up in the morning. I said, okay, so we're fully clothed. And the water, you could hear it going down underneath our cots. So next morning it stopped, and the sun was shining real nice, and they called us out to go to breakfast. And we could hear in the distance, we could hear these guys going, hot dog, hot dog, hot dog, hot dog, three. And then singing cadence. So we didn't know what that was all about, you know. And we fell out right after breakfast. We fell out. They formed us up. Our sergeant took charge of us and said, you guys have to go to this, we got to take you to this building over here, and you got some more tests to go through. Well, they gave us some more tests, and all of a sudden, they said, well, fall out. They brought us back out. Then they said, started going through the names of all of us. This so-and-so, you're assigned to D Company. So-and-so, you're assigned to D Company. You're going to D Company. So most of the guys that were with me in the train, we all got assigned to Dog Company. And some of them got to be assigned to E Company, and some of them to F Company, which was the battalion. Then they started in on us again, falling out early in the morning. Then they issued us different equipment. And there was this mountain called Currahee Mountain. And we used to run up that sucker every morning. It was 3 miles up and then 3 miles down. And the last quarter of a mile was almost a 45-degree angle, man. So we had to run that up there. And that was every morning. That was part of our we'd come in, we'd eat breakfast, then it started our physical training, and doing calisthenics all morning long. Then we'd get back into the classrooms, study about the nomenclature of the weapons and stuff, you know. And we got the first guns that we got were the old infield bolt-action rifles that we got. So we used to do the calisthenics with that, and then all of a sudden they took those away from us and they issued us a brand new M1 rifle, which was gas operated, and you put a clip in there of 8 shots. You didn't have to mess with a bolt to throw a cartridge into the chamber. So those suckers were something else. And they weighed, I think it was 9 pounds and something, the weapon itself. And you'd put a clip of 8 shots, 8 cartridges in there. And then they started taking us to the rifle range. For a week, they didn't let us shoot anything. They taught us how to put our rifles to our shoulder, and they told us, be careful when you hit that trying to think what the hell they call that. Anyways, it was a lever that threw your cartridge in there. But they'd hit it to open it up, and then it would release. Once the cartridge went in, it would release it. So we had one guy doing that. You doing this, pointing the rifle, your shoulder hurt. But for a whole week we did that without any ammunition. Meanwhile, we're still going through our physical training every morning, calisthenics and stuff. Then they finished building the obstacle course. Then we started running the obstacle course too. And every morning we still had to jump, go up and run up the Curry Mountain. And we had the category that we had, the officers and non-commissioned officers, like our platoon sergeant. I'll never forget him. His name was Leroy Shipman. And he was from here, from Palm, Desert Palms?
Palm Desert?
Yeah. He was from around there. That's where he was from. But man, he was built like a small truck. And he had already been in jump school. So when he got us, he says, I'm your sergeant and I'm going to make you the greatest fighters in the world. Said, okay. Says, by the time I get through with you guys, you'll be able to whip any 10 men your size. Really? He lied to us. We could only go 5. At least that's all I could anyway. But like I said, I'll never forget him, because he stayed my platoon sergeant all the way to Normandy. Our company commander was also Captain Gross. I think he was from Santa Barbara. He and his wife were from Santa Barbara. And he spoke Spanish better than I did. And he heard me one day talking to this pal of mine next in Spanish, and this sergeant got all over me. This other squad leader got over me, not Shipman. He said, what are you doing? Speak English. I said, yeah, okay. Why? He says, how do I know that you're not talking about me? I said, well, if I wanted to talk about you, I'd let you know. Get down and give me 20 push-ups. And that's how they punish us, Anytime you messed up cadence or something, get down, give me 50 push-ups. Well, it wasn't very long that I was doing 100 push-ups and not even breathe heavily with that. And the calisthenics was really good. During our basic training, we went through all the weapons that we had to qualify were the M1 rifle, the 30 caliber light machine gun, the submachine gun, the 45, and the 60 millimeter mortar, which was a small one, but that was part of the squad, form of the squad of 14 men. We had a machine gun section, and that's 2 guys that handled the mortar. in a platoon. So, but we all had to qualify on those things. I mean, we all had to be efficient on them, regardless. And they trained us all for that. And like I said, we had to tear down our weapons, redo them, blindfolded. We had to reassemble our weapons in case we had to do it in the dark and stuff, you know. So that's all the training we got during our basic training. And infantry tactics were implied in there, and mostly was for our physical training. I went from 122 pounds when I went in there to 145 pounds in 13 weeks. And there wasn't an ounce of fat on me. The kids that were heavy, they lost weight and they got muscle, yeah, because of the way that was it. We had a little guy called Steve Vella. And in the obstacle course, they had a monkey bars, and that you had to go across this creek. Well, poor Steve, every time he got to the middle of it, he'd fall. And he kept doing that for the first week or two, and then after a while, he got to where he could go around there. But I mean, I'm talking about the guy was only about 5'5" maybe, and he got to be our mail clerk at a company. And some of the guys that we would sit in the barracks messing around, you know, because we didn't get any passes during the time we were going through basic training. And they used to say, hey man, you know, they talk about this big bad paratroopers, and then you can see Steve Vella walking in, like, how bad he looked, you know, how small he was. Oh, here's my daughter and my favorite son-in-law.
Just wanted to make sure I could shake your hand, introduce myself in person for everything that you're doing.
Thank you for reaching out.
I really appreciate this.
It's an honor. It's an honor.
Hello.
Oh, you got my message?
No, because I didn't.
We've been out of the house.
I cannot find anything of my memorabilia.
Why?
I don't know. There was all in that case there. And I can't find where it went. I don't know, Mika.
Wow.
I was just telling Zach about it. What I had, and I can't find nothing in my little case there. I got some other stuff in there.
Your sons
But it-
probably have all divided it up.
I don't know what happened. It's gone. And I'm very disappointed. He was supposed to be here to see that stuff, and
Yes.
you know.
How about the parachute?
That's the only thing that's left.
And your helmet's not around either? No?
No.
I put a thing out to your grandsons, and no one says that they have it. I know my son says he doesn't have it.
Yeah, I know. So everybody says they don't have it. Somebody got it.
The only one I could think of is probably Brandon, but he's not going to say it if he doesn't. If he does.
No, if he lost it, they lose it. They were. The helmet had was like one of our the ones that we jumped with,
Oh yeah.
which had a net, and then we had a medical kit right up in front of us, you know, for first aid kits. And that was had everything in there for if you fell and wounded. I could take that off, fix you up, and mark you down so that the medics could get to you. And
This is to help you on your
Oh,
project.
you're so sweet. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Because I know that you're going to need it. Because there aren't that many of them left.
No, there's not. And I'm honored to be sitting down with one right now. So.
well, then give me back the money. I'm kidding you.
He'll lose it. Don't give it to him.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So where were we?
We're talking about still in basic training.
Yeah, I told you about. Oh
Talking
yeah.
about the weapons.
And one day we were sitting eating breakfast, and some guy comes in and yells, "Hey, E Company has just broke the record of going up and down Currahee Mountain." So our adjutant, Lieutenant McMillan, said, "Well, we're going up there and break their record." We had just eaten breakfast. So we got to put on our shorts. And here we go up the mountain. Believe it or not, about 85% of us made it back. And that's all we had to qualify. And we did break that record. But we were helping ourselves. Somebody, well, come on, get up here. Let's keep going. Going up there was the worst part, but coming down, you know, you're coming down at a pace twice as hard, fast than just double timing like we do double time up the mountain. But we broke that record.
You know what the time was?
I forget what the time was, but it was there was a 3-mile run, so it had to be 20 minutes or something like that. I forgot what it was, but we did break their record by a few minutes, So we continue with our basic training there, and after 13 weeks, they said that we were ready to go to jump school. So our battalion commander got an idea to prove, since the first battalion went to Fort Benning before we did. They were ahead of us about 2 or 3 weeks, And he wanted to prove to the cadre at the jump school that we were physically ready without having to take more physical training there at Fort Benning. So he says, we're going to march from here to Atlanta, Georgia. Now, Toccoa, Georgia is about maybe 119 miles northeast of Atlanta. And we were going to march it full equipped in 72 hours. Well, there's another thing. It's about us helping each other, Guys that they got blisters and all stuff that didn't make sure that their shoes fit them right and stuff, And a lot of guys would almost give up, so we'd pick them up, come on. So we made it in 72 hours. We bivouacked out of Atlanta, and that evening, the word came down that anybody that wanted to go to town could get a pass to go to town. Within 15 minutes, the only ones that were in camp were the guards. The rest of them were in Atlanta. Next morning, the commander, they roused us up. They'll say, fall out, get your equipment on. You pretty tough guys, aren't you? Well, we'll see how tough you are. We're going to double time from here to the train station. So again, we're helping each other, but all of us made it to the train station, which we got in the train, and then from there they took us to jump school. That was in late November, and We went through jump school. There we learned how to pack a chute, how to maneuver, how to land, how to land, and they jumped us from 30-foot towers onto the ground, taught us how to tumble and how to collapse our chutes, and we had mock-ups there to go out the door we had to jump out to go through that training, and they taught us how to pack our chutes so they would know that how safe they really were.
When you were jumping from the tower, did you have any safety harnesses or anything, or were you just you?
It was after we went to the towers that we had at that time that we had a harness, but we also had a parachute that they would take us up there and release us, and then we'd come in on that, But when we were jumping out of the 34-foot towers, no, we didn't have anything. That was how hard you would hit after you came close to the ground, and your chute would start to lose any wind support, any air support, so you'd hit that hard. So you had to learn how to tumble and stuff.
You remember the first time you jumped off there?
Oh yeah. Best jump I ever made.
Did you have any nerves about getting hurt?
No. There's one thing a lot of people ask me how I felt, if I had any fear. They trained us so well that you didn't think about any accidents and stuff like that. Although we had some, because after we went to jump school, we got our wings. The battalion got our wings on December 25th, 1944. Or 1943, I'm sorry, 1943. That's when we got our wings. Then, after we got our wings, they gave us a 10-day pass. Then we were to report to Camp McCall, North Carolina, for advanced training. So we trained there, the jungle training and other stuff, more Army tactics and stuff. And then that summer we went on maneuvers, is what they call the Tennessee maneuvers. And we went up against, with blanks and stuff. We went to actual operations of learning how to block a road, or how to protect a bridge, or how to blow it up. So we were taught all of that with TNT, actually, and what they called C2 at that time, which was a mixture of explosives, but it was in like a dough form that you could place it anywhere you want to, put a cap into it, and set a wire on it and get away from it, and then just and blow it up. So we learned all of that. During that time, though, we did have some casualties, some guys that got hurt prematurely, or messing up, really. There accidents that happened to them, and so some of them lost their hands, some of them lost their lives during that training. And like I said, then we went on maneuvers, and after the maneuvers we went to Fort Bragg, North Carolina. We were in Fort Bragg, and from there they put us in a train and they shipped us to Camp Shanks, New York. And this was in September of '43. Then we went to England in a convoy.
So you guys have been training for about a year.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I tell everybody we were trained. Then we went to England. We landed in Liverpool. Then they scattered the division, which, by the way, while we were on the boat, and we were in a big English liner that had been converted to a troop ship, and we went over in a convoy. While we were there, before we went in there, they told us to take our patches off, so there any identification, because it wasn't till 43 that the division adopted our regiment. All the regiments that were being formed at that time were all bastard regiments, what you call bastard regiments. Then we were assigned to certain divisions, and in 43 we got assigned to the 101st, and we went with them across to England as the 101st Airborne Division. And it was supposed to be a big secret. Yet when we got there, we got to England, and we got settled in this little place called Airborne Wilts. Our company got Airborne Wilts. And turned the radio on, and the XSL, he said, "Welcome to the 101st Airborne Division." Now, how the hell the Nazis found out? And there were things like that. But then in England, we kept training. We made parachute jumps. Then at one time, my platoon was assigned to go to this British camp of Airborne and learn their tactics or learn their operations, And we got to jump out of a Lancaster, which is entirely different than jumping from the C-47s. The C-47s, we go out the door. The British Lancaster, we went down a hole. So you didn't feel no prop flaps like we did coming out of the C-47s.
Jumping out of the bomb bay?
Yeah, type like. So we went there for a week with them and trained with them. We spent our first, I remember our first Christmas there in England was spent at their camp. We were invited to spend Christmas with them. That's where I learned to do the hokey pokey and rolling me over the clover, which were soldier songs. I don't know if you're familiar with those songs.
I know the hokey pokey.
Yeah.
I don't know about the other one.
Yeah. Well, the other one was by the numbers, that was just the number one, and the fun has just begun. Roll me over in the clover, do it again. Roll me over. Stuff like that, and then number two, number three, number four.
Keep going.
Yeah. But that was a fun song. The Limeys taught us a lot, The Limeys. The English, I'm sorry. So from there, like I said, we made a couple of night jumps to practice jumping at night. And we had to make one to qualify as a paratrooper, you had to make 5 jumps and 1 night jump at that time.
What altitude would you be jumping from?
During the training, we were jumping from 600 or 800 feet. And they would say that we would probably jump around 500 or maybe 600 feet in combat.
And when you jump, the chute would automatically...
Yeah, the chute was attached to the plane on a static line. And that was about maybe 75 feet long. When you went out the door, the proper blast would hit you, and if you were going out correctly, you could see your feet in front of you, and you would go like this, and then you could see your chute open up and then start to deflate out underneath you, over you. So if you went out the door correctly, if you had to mess up anyway,
Yeah, we're gonna go.
okay,
Take care. Thank you, guys.
You're welcome.
okay, mija.
Thank you.
Later, mijo.
In the little break here, one thing. My dad, who's also a World War II vet,
Yeah.
he met him recently
your dad still living?
No, he's in Florida now.
Okay.
So
How cool.
our farm was.
That was something new when I found out that he was from around Toccoa, Georgia.
Yeah.
You
So
got
they
that
bond-
connection.
They bonded on that.
Absolutely. How funny.
It's weird.
Yeah, small world.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
guys. Thank
Take
you.
care.
Love you.
Maybe.
We'll be in touch.
Okay. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's my favorite son-in-law.
Yeah.
That's the only one I have. And he always says that. Yeah, because I'm the only one you have. That's why I'm your favorite. That's
Still
all,
a
man.
favorite, though.
You know,
That's
hey. Yeah, because I only had one daughter and I had 4 boys, my mom and I.
So you're talking about the proper technique for jumping out.
Huh?
So you were talking about the proper technique
Oh.
for jumping out
Yeah.
of the plane.
Otherwise, you could always see the guys that went out wrong, maybe that go out head first or hit the side of the plane or maybe not wanting to go at all. We had some of those guys that sometimes would freeze at the door and you would have to push them out. But we were lucky. Most of the guys that jumped with me we'd go out the door without no hassles, and hit the drop zone. During the practice jumps, we would always hit the drop zones. And like I said, in England we did a lot of training. We went on maneuvers with the British, against the British in southern England, and was a place that's called Torquay, England, which was on one side of Hampton, New Hampshire. And that was about all. I mean, the closest town to us, large town, was Swindon, Wales. So that's where we'd go on the weekends to the Red Cross clubs that they had there and dancing for us on Saturday night and meet the girls, which was fun. Then, after all our training it must have been around, let's see, we were in the marshalling area 2 weeks before we jumped into Normandy.
Let me ask you this real quick. You mentioned you guys packed your own chutes.
Not after we left jump school.
Okay, but during jump school they taught you the proper way. And what was the technique? Can you explain that at all, or would you just have to see it to understand it?
Well, first of all, we had long tables
Yeah.
to set the parachute. Then that teach us how to get the lines untangle the lines and stuff, and set them up before we would take and start folding them and put them into the backpack, which they were held it was like how could you describe it? Like a pigtail from the girl's hair,
Mm-hmm.
but not quite like that. But you had to have the lines just so right, and you had to put them. And they had rubber bands on both ends, and they would go like this all the way up to the front. Then there was a little parachute attached to the main pack, to the apex of the parachute, and that would be attached to the back cover of the backpack, and then you put that together, and then you'd lace up the backpack. so that when you were going to jump, they'd line you up. They say stand up, and then it says check equipment, and the checking of equipment was to make sure that your parachute was on right, and the stuff that everything was clear, and that you were hooked up right. Then you sound off, and then after it says check equipment, it says all right, stand at the door. So you start shuffling towards the door. Then they'd say, okay, stand at the door. So you stand at the door, and you get ready to jump, and the jump master would hit you in the leg and say, go, go, go. And you kept following the guy in front of you. And if you didn't go like you were supposed to, that's why I say a lot of guys got little cherry marks, what they call cherry marks, because of the risers and your harness that you had with and at that time we had snap fasteners on our parachutes, and we'd have an emergency chute which was only about 22 feet in diameter, and that was what they called emergency chute, and that was in front of you in case your main chute didn't open, because when you go out the door you'd count 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, and you should get the snap of the jump when they and when the chute had deployed. If it didn't deploy, you better check out and see what's going on. And if you didn't see it deploy enough, so you had a cigarette roll, which some guys did, because their lines would, their suspension lines would tangle up in their chute, and the chute wouldn't open properly. And then they get a streamer, what they call a streamer, and you'd have to open your emergency chute. Some of the guys had those kind of accidents. I never did. Then they had one they called when one suspension line went over the chute, they would form two pockets on the parachute. They called it a Mae West. And that's about the extent of our training for jumping. And after that, we left it up to our parachute maintenance company, which did all of that for us.
And after you jumped and after your chute opened up, how long would it be until you reached the ground? How long would you be descending for?
It depends a lot on the weather. Usually, with a parachute, normally you would drop about 22 feet per second. You descend at that rate until you got close to the ground. Then it got faster. And depending on how high you jumped, as to how long it would take you to get down to the ground. But they would try to get us. Like I said, in combat, we were supposed to jump at 500 feet. So they wouldn't give time for the enemy to shoot us down off when we were coming down, and we'd have a shorter time in the air. At least that's what the practice jumps were when we were jumping without jumping into enemy territory, and that was okay with us, But when we went to the marshalling area, we were in the marshalling area for 2 weeks, and we weren't allowed to go anywhere. All the time they were gathering all the ships and the people that were going to participate into the Operation Overlord, which was Normandy. And it started raining like a son of a gun there too. So we had started to go onto the plains one day, and they canceled us. They said, "No, get back. We're not jumping today because of the weather." So we said, "Oh boy, this is great." Meanwhile, we had been trained so well that we were all ready to go. I mean, everybody was talking about, we're going to go into combat, man. Where the hell are we going to? Rumors of all kinds, but nobody knew.
Revved up.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's in fact our headquarters was really waiting for a break in the weather, and on June 5th, they got a break in the weather, so they gave us the go-ahead sign. So that evening, we were loaded up in the planes, and that was something that you would never forget, man. The roar of the engines of the plane, maneuvering around to take their place in the echelon of what we were going to jump in. And we were in the first echelon. The only guys that were in front of us was the Pathfinders. And the Pathfinders' job was to land in the jump zone, the drop zone, set up a beak search so the planes could follow in and know exactly where to drop you. But what we didn't know was that the other parachute drops that were made before us were made in Sicily and Salerno, I think. There were two jumps made. Were only made by regiments, or there were a battalion or something like that went in there. It wasn't no large.
Smaller.
So those guys that jump them in there were okay. They didn't run into that much opposition or whatever. But our jump was so large, and we had so many guys, so many pilots, that had never even been in combat. According to our flight plan, once we formed, we were headed west out of England, going west so that we'd come around to the opposite side of the peninsula of France. On that side of the peninsula where we came into were two islands that were German held. So when they heard all these planes, they started shooting up at us. Aircraft was coming up so fast that you could walk down in it. And our plane started to go in this way. And they started breaking formation, the guys that had never been, and they were supposed to drop us at a safe spot, at a safe height. But when they broke ranks, to get under the aircraft and everything else, when we finally got the green light to jump, we were standing up all the way. Right after they started the aircraft, they stood us up. Lieutenant Gage said, "Stand up and hook up. We're going down. Standing up." Yeah, right, okay. Nothing like that was going through our mind at that time. All we was getting ready to get the hell out of the plane,
Before we get too far along there, can we go back to the preparation for getting on the plane? What was your preparation mentally and physically going into the operation? Did you know what your mission was?
All the 2 weeks that we were there, we had sent tables and with the form of the terrain of where we were going to go. We had air photos of what to look for when we get in there and stuff like that. Yeah, we were briefed on all that stuff before we went in there. What they didn't tell us what the name of the place were, you know. But they showed us where the towns were, where our drop zones were, mostly, and where together. All of that training or all that briefing was for zilch, as far as I'm concerned, because of the fact that once we hit the peninsula, our planes all started going everywhere. I mean, they broke up. The formations broke up. I swear, to this day, that we were dropped about 200 feet off the ground, because I went out the door and I hit the door and I went sideways and I'm loaded down like a mule was the stuff that I had to carry. I twisted, and then right before I twisted, I hit the ground. And that was pretty close. I mean, because your parachute, I think the length of the parachute is about 72 feet. Plus the static line is another 20 feet or something like that to clear you from the plane. So by the time your chute deploys, you've done dropped 100 and something feet. And you start. We had they had issued us a leg pack to put more extra ammunition in and rations that was developed by the English. We hadn't practiced with that leg pack no time, but they give it to us right before we jumped into Normandy. And that was on a 30-foot rope. So when you'd release it, you would get the slack after, you know, you'd know you were that close to the ground. I still don't remember what happened to that pack. And I landed in 3 feet of water. The Germans were prepared for an airborne invasion. They flooded all the fields, and they put up iron stakes for our landing, for parachute landing and stuff, you know, glider landings and stuff. So when I landed face first, and my parachute went in front of me and started dragging me. And I tried to get up out of the water, you know, tried to collapse my chute and try to get up, and I'd slip in there, I'd go back into the water, start drinking more water. And about the third time I did that, I said, God, don't let me die like this after all my training. That's the only thing that came to my mind. Don't let me die like this after all my training. And I don't know where this tree came from, but the wind blew my chute up against the tree, and it stopped. So I got up, the water hit me in the knees. I got all my stuff, I started getting my stuff off, you know, and that snap fasteners that we had to, in order to get out of our chute. And I heard some other guys yelling for help. So I took my chute off and just threw it down. And I went over to try and help this other guy. So I collapsed his chute, and he got up, and I told him, I says, there's some more guys in trouble, man. Let's go. I'm going this way, you go that way, and we try and get. Well, out of the bunch that jumped in there, we got about 7 guys together. One of the guys was from the 82nd Airborne. And they were supposed to jump miles from where we were. You know, their drop zone was a place called St. Marie Église, was out that was a good way from our, which was Saint Marie de Conte, was the month where we were our drop zone was.
Do you know? Did you guys land in your drop zone, or did you guys get displaced as well?
Hell no, we didn't land nowhere near. Yeah. See if I can find that.
Is it in that book there? You want me to grab that?
Let's see if I put it in here.
It's not in here, huh?
No. Uh, what the hell did I do with that stuff? See? Well, here's something this guys did for us. Thought I had this stuff here.
Here, let me pull this off you real quick.
Okay. Okay, we was where we got together, about 7 guys, and one of the guys was from the 82nd. That they dropped those guys. A plane load must have been dropped behind us, on top of us, you know. But no, we were closer to the beach than we were to our objective when we dropped. And once we got to the road, we got together and we started hearing some firing. So we started going towards that firefight that we're having. Somebody was having a firefight. We started heading towards them. And we ourselves we came under fire too. And we got us out of that scrap after firing back at them and stuff, and they must have seen that we had more firepower than they had, so they took off, and we never caught up with them, whoever those Germans were.
And it was still dark out at this point.
Yeah, we're talking about maybe 1:30 in the morning, or maybe close to 2:00 in the morning, when this was happening. Because, like I said, by the time we jumped, got out of our chute, and I helped those two other guys, and the other guys helped other guys. This is where we got together, and we had the corporal that was leading us. He was from B Company. I think it was from the 1st Battalion. And he was the one that was leading us towards this firefight and trying to get back to our. And we saw a sign, a road sign that said quarantine so many kilometers. What the hell? Who's this quarantine? We never heard about it. You know, that wasn't told to us. We were told about our objective, the surrounding area, and that was it. That's what we were supposed to cover. Get to the bridges, set up roadblocks, create hell so that no German troops could come and help the guys at the beachhead. Guys that were there waiting for our guys at 6:00 in the morning. So that was our objective, was to raise hell, blow up bridges if we had to, throw up roadblocks. We run into real heavy opposition, made sure that the Germans couldn't send any support troops to the guys that were already in the bunkers waiting for our boys at 6:00 in the morning. So we went from there, and then we found a spot and we rested a while, and we started seeing this. By this time, as daybreak the day start breaking, and we hear the bombardments at the beach. It was just like thunder or like earthquake and stuff. Those big old shells that the Navy was shooting at. And then we started watching the gliders start coming in. The hedgerows, what you thought maybe were just little brush trees, or bushes, The Germans had put growth on rock fences or fences that they made for those. So we're on this side, and the Germans are on that side, at this open field, and a couple of the gliders start coming in right over us, and they start heading towards the German side. They hit the hedgerows thinking that would slow them down. Instead, they just hit them and went over like this, man. And the guys were pouring out of there, all, bloody. So we ran to help them out. All the time we were covering their fire. Unknown. We helped some of those guys get out, and some of them were hurt real bad. And then we started away from there after we helped those guys out, and the more gliders started coming in. Then we started looking for our units. So we were lost from our units. We finally got was where my company was, but that by this time it's almost sunset when I joined up with our company.
The whole day almost gone by.
Yeah, and after that we just the only other guy that was with me from Dog Company was Victor Luna, and Victor Luna lives in Del Rio. He's still alive. We still talk by phone all the time, His wife just passed away last month, and I've been talking to him more often to see how he's doing, and stuff. In fact, in D-Day, I called him, say, yeah, I remember where the hell we were. When I told him, hey, it's me, Martinez. Yeah, don't worry, I remember where the hell we were. Not that it worked either. So he's in pretty bad shape too. His legs were frozen in the Battle of the Bulge, and that's where we got separated, in the Battle of the Bulge. And he and another couple of buddies of mine that but then by this time, we started getting assignments of roadblocks and stuff farther up, and then came when the troops caught up with us, the landing and the tanks started coming in that night. My company commander got on top of one of the damn tanks to show him where the main resistance was for us. And an 88 hit the tank, and there went our company commander, man. My platoon leader, I never saw him after he went out the door. I never saw him again. And the last thing he told me, he says, Martinez, see you in San Antonio. And he went out the door leading our stick.
That was the last time you ever saw him.
Sergeant Shipman was also right behind him. That's the last time I saw him. And the other guy, William Ramirez, was next to me in the jump line, along with Luna and stuff. I never saw him again.
How many guys would jump out of a single plane?
19.
And you know about how many you ended up reconnecting with after?
See, Warren Hill, Meeks, Luna. Kapopoulos. Litton, Walt Litton. And Jackson. That's about the only guys I remember that made it out of that plane.
Do you know what happened to the rest of them, for the most part?
Yeah, some of them got wounded. Some of them got. Most of them got wounded or killed, and sent back to England with me, because I got hit the fourth day. I got hit. Word came down that we were going to take quarantine. So in the morning we formed up what was left of the company, of our company, and E company, and we went in to try to take quarantine. We took it, and the French people come out to start celebrating and stuff because they saw that we were Americans and stuff, you know. The damn Germans regrouped and counterattacked and drove our asses out. So then the 501 and some of their units started to, by that time it was afternoon, late in the afternoon, and hotter than hell. We're going to take the town again, man. Let's go. So we started to take the town again. And then by this time the Germans had a really resistance on us, you know. And there was a machine gun that pinned us down beside the road going into quarantine. We had just gotten out of the apple orchards. And we hit the dirt. And this lieutenant that took over our platoon called out, said, Martinez, look up and see where that machine gun's firing from, you know. So I'm obeying orders. I just went over the hedge of the road and started to look up, and boom, man, the bullet hit in front of me, and it just caught me right here in the eye. The impact of the thing, it almost knocked me out. And when I came down like this, you know, that Lieutenant Kelly, I think was his name, he says, "Are you hurt, Martinez?" What the fuck does it look like? And the blood's coming out, spurting, and you know. He says, "Well, stay down." Says, "Yeah, no, I'm staying down." Shit. So right away they called the medic, and he looked at my eye. I thought I had lost my eye. You know. The guy says, "No, you're okay. You're okay. It hit out of your eye. It didn't hit your eye." By this time, I can't see out of either eye, because the impact of the bullet that hit closed this eye and this eye too. So I'm looking like this, you know. So right away they red tagged my ass, and they took me back to the medics, and they put me in the boat, and while I was in the boat going back to England, they operated on me, and the doctor that took the piece of lead that was in there says, "Here, you want it for a souvenir?" And he gave it to me in a piece of gauze, and I put it in my pocket. That's the last time I saw it. Then I went to, they took me to Cheltenham, England, where they had a military hospital there. And I stayed there for the next 2 weeks. And after that, they sent me right back to Marmalone or Airborne Wilts to wait for the division, because the division hadn't been relieved yet. And about a week later, here comes the rest of the company. They found me there and said, "What the hell happened to you?" This is a long story. So they re-equipped us. They brought in some new people some new replacements, what they call replacements. And they threw a big party for us. That's here in this book. You'll see it. And we went on a 10-day leave. We rested, and pretty soon we're back in training. Then they told us we had another parachute jump we were going to make. First they told us we were going to jump right out of Brussels. No, right out of Paris. They told us we might jump in right out of Paris. But by this time, Patton had taken Paris, or him and de Gaulle had taken Paris. So he said, "Okay, then we'll jump you near Brussels, Belgium." The English took Brussels. So then the big head said, "Well, we'll send them into Holland." Well, in Holland, it was a strictly British operation. The only two American divisions that jumped into Holland were the 101st and the 82nd. But that's all covered in the bridge too far. Operation Market Garden, which was my second combat jump. Now that went entirely different, because we jumped at 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
During the daylight.
Daylight, and we hit the drop zone with no hassles.
Now, do you think when you guys dropped in on D-Day, the fact that you guys were scattered all over the place, do you think that worked to your advantage at all, or?
They said that it did, because the Germans didn't know exactly how many troops got landed. They expected a drop, but at a certain spot. Here we are all over the damn peninsula. So they, that confused them, and that worked to our advantage.
And you mentioned when you did jump, you're carrying a bunch of stuff. What did you have on you besides?
We carried ammunition for 3 days. We carried food for 3 days, rations for 3 days. We carried hand grenades in an extra canteen holder. We had that damn leg pack with boxes of machine gun ammunition and anti-personnel mines. And across I had a 30 caliber light machine gun underneath the emergency chute. That's how I was loaded down. And of course I had a 45, which is the only thing I had after I threw everything off, because everything was full of mud. There wasn't no way I could use it.
So you abandoned everything.
Yeah, I had to. My backpack was the only thing that was on my back, and that was full of water, but it wasn't muddy like the rest of the stuff that I had. You know.
Do you know about how much weight you were carrying on?
According to what they say, and all I know was heavy, but they said we were carrying about 45 pounds. You know, each soldier was carrying it, at least that. You know. The really difficult thing was those snap fasteners that took us so long to undo. And
You think it was a poor design? For what?
well, that was what they were at that time. You know, that was what they were using. The Army. See, before 1942, there were no airborne outfits made. We were the first ones. We were more like an experimental thing, you know, because the Germans had used them successfully in Europe. They figured we could do the same thing. Only we had better equipment than they did. So that gave us an advantage too, you know. That I think is what saved us. Those of us that survived, I think, survived because we were either blessed, and I always say I was blessed, but our training had a lot to do with that. You know, we were told what our objective was, and that's what was in our mind. That's what we were going to do, regardless of what. You were supposed to assemble at a certain place. You had to look for that place to assemble. But like I said, our planes were scattered so much that it took us all day before we really assembled to where we were more or less a fighting force, you know.
Now, the plane that you were in, did it get hit by any of the anti-aircraft fire?
They must have been hit. You couldn't tell because, like I said, that it was going like this, and then, you know, weaving and waving, and we could hear the blast close to us, so it must have been hit.
So the pilot was making evasive, trying to
evasive maneuvers, yeah. And once I landed, and I could see the flares and anti-aircraft guns still going up at our plane, and I could actually see the belly of our planes going over us like that, you know. Some of them already on fire. So God only knows how some of the guys actually dropped some of our troops in the ocean, in the beach.
Dropped it way too soon.
Yeah. Well, no, too late.
Oh, okay.
See, let's see how I could explain this. Let's see. Yeah. We were supposed to drop over here where the beaches were. We were supposed to drop in here.
Because you guys approached.
But the planes came back around this way, and that's why some of them were dropped over here, clear away from our drop zone.
So you guys almost experienced the same fate?
Yeah, we almost, we weren't too far from the beach.
Was that approach intentional so then they wouldn't have to turn around to head back to England?
I have no idea what the thing was about that, because there's two islands over here that I told you were the ones that opened up when it was the anti-aircraft guns, you know.
So do you remember about how long that time was until you guys actually jumped? From when you guys started taking on enemy fire until you got out?
Well, I know we were already standing up,
Yeah.
and it couldn't have been too long. Couldn't have been too long after we got the green light to jump.
You said you saw a few of the planes on fire. Did you see any planes go down at all?
Yeah. Yeah, they went down in the ocean. Because, like I say, they flew in their line of flight, the way they were going. They didn't lose their direction. What they did lose was where they were going to drop us.
Now, was your first experience of combat anything like you thought it would be?
Well, we were trained to expect any, obstacles and to face the enemy. We were trained in hand-to-hand combat. We were trained to like I said, we're trained to kill and survive. And we were taught to depend, let's say I had to depend on you, you had to depend on me. And if we got into trouble, we both got into trouble. Or the other guy on our side, the other guy on your other side. And that's one thing that was in your mind all the time, And survival is one thing that drives you, I mean, you don't... I think I was too damn young to realize exactly that I could get killed. I never thought I would, even after I got hit. In fact, once I got hit, I can survive this, I can survive anything, I can survive the jump, I can survive anything. And it got to the point where we started getting replacements and guys that were coming from the States from jump school to join our fighting units, what was left of us. So we had to look after them. And that I think that took away from our thinking, about dying or stuff like that. Trying to make sure that those guys were all right and they learned, they got experience right there in combat, A lot of guys that they made their sixth jump in combat.
Can you talk a little bit about the difference between jumping at night as opposed to jumping during the daytime? Are there other obstacles that you'd run into?
Well, the difference was that once we got into close to our drop zone, we experienced some in the aircraft, but not as heavy as the ones that we had when we went into Normandy. And once we landed, oh, by the way, by this time, the British had developed a quick release for the parachutes. And all you had to do was pull this pin, hit it, and all the straps would fall.
Did you guys adopt that, or?
They gave it to us right before we jumped into Holland. That was a lot of difference, too.
So you could have benefited from that.
Oh, hell yes. Well, yeah, we could have benefited a lot, too, because some of those guys that drowned in there was because they couldn't get out of their chute.
Now, would you have to step out of the harness?
No, once you had Lake straps here,
Mm-hmm.
and you just take them off, drop them off. Yeah.
Now on that first jump and during Normandy, did you see any guys stuck in trees or not actually make it to the ground?
Not until the next morning.
Not until the next morning.
Not until daylight. We saw some of the guys that were hung up in trees.
Now, going into Operation Market Garden, did you guys take off from England again?
Yes.
And was that sort of the same routine as when you jumped into Normandy?
Yeah, this was the same routine, except that, like I said, we were the only two American divisions. It was strictly a British operation. And that, it was even a larger drop, airborne drop, than the one in Normandy.
I was bigger.
It was bigger. And the pilots by this time were more, experienced into dropping troops. The ones that dropped us into Holland didn't even break their formation. And the thing was that the one of us, the division dropped. The 101st dropped in Zon, Holland. The 82nd was dropped in Nijmegen, near the Nijmegen Bridge, which was, I don't remember how many kilometers north of us where we landed. Our objective was to take Eindhoven and the bridges across the canals in Zon, which were, the canals were just like heavy rivers, because they had all their ships would come in through those canals. The Dutch people depended on those canals, and the Germans depended on those canals too. So that was our job. Now, when we jumped into Holland, the Holland Underground was a lot of help, because they came to the drop zone to tell us, look out for that section over there. That's where a lot of Germans are, and that's this and that. Once we got assembled, our objective to take the bridge in Zon. Going into the town of Zon, we were going in around the buildings and stuff. We ran into some opposition. We took care of that. And right before, I would say our scouts were already across the bridge. And we must have been about maybe 300 yards from it. And we came under heavy fire, with machine gun fire, from the Germans across the bridge, because they were getting ready to blow that up. And
the Germans were going to blow up the bridge.
Yeah. And like I said, our scouts, two of our guys from the company were already across, and they came under heavy fire. We came into heavy fire, so we ducked behind a building. Our regimental commander, Colonel Sink, came up and he called to our company commander, which was Joe McMillan, Captain Joe McMillan. Says, Mac, what the hell's going on? What's holding you up? And just about that time, they burst some more stuff, so he had to duck. Good thing he did, because that's when they blew up the damn bridge. And this big, heavy pylons would come right by us on the road. If he had been standing where he was standing when he was talking to Captain McMillan, he would have been blown to hell. And right away that held us up to where that's as far as we could go that afternoon. Till we called the engineers, and the engineers came, and the bridge was blown on both sides. They were holding it up, but it fell intact into the canal. So we could jump in there and run across and get on the other side. But with the help of the engineers, we did that. We got to the other side. And then we went into Eindhoven to take Eindhoven. During the time we were taking that, we ran into heavy opposition too. The Germans had prepared most of those towns and cities that we went into with yellow circles in certain buildings. And they would set up their tanks and point at that yellow target to where any movement would come across there, they'd open fire with those damn 88s. And those 88s were so powerful. I mean, they could use them against a person, like a rifle. And that's how good those guys were with those damn 88s. And they had mounted them on their tanks by this time. And they used them for anti-aircraft guns. That same day that we hit Zon, Company D went on the side of the city, of the town, and E Company went on the other side of the town. And we headed towards the canal. We ran into an 88, before we got there, that opened fire on us, and we had to knock that out. E Company had the same problem over there where they were at. So we got across the bridge, we got to the other side, then we headed into Eindhoven. In Eindhoven, we met a lot of resistance too, which, by the way, that's where Galbraith got hit real bad, to where he got sent back to the city. He almost lost a leg, and he lost part of his hip. But he was, like I said, he was in I Company. He was in the 3rd Battalion. So that's where he got wounded.
That was the end of the war for him?
No, for him, yeah, it was. Yeah, because he went back to England and was in the hospital for a long time before he sent him back to the States. We took Eindhoven.
How long did it take you to take Eindhoven from the jump?
Another day.
You did.
Another day. Full day. We settled into Eindhoven that first night, and then we set up a perimeter around it, and we still got some firefights during the night. And next day, we finally got clear, and then we started up the road towards Nijmegen, because we were supposed to hook up with the 82nd in Nijmegen. During the time that we were on the highway to Eindhoven and Arnhem, which the British had jumped in right across the bridge from Nijmegen, they crossed the bridge across to Arnhem. And that was the British paratroopers that jumped in there, our brothers. We started up the highway towards Nijmegen, the supply lines of the British were coming up that road. The Germans cut off the supply line, so they would call us back to open the supply line because the truck drivers were non-combatants, so they'd sit on the side of the road waiting for us to come back and open the road for them. Well, they did that about 3 times. Then we did 3 times we had to come back and open the road for them. And then we finally got up to where the Nijmegen was, where the 82nd was. And then we went into what they called an island, and surrounded by canals, and right across the river from the Rhine River, from Arnhem. We were on this side. So the guys in Arnhem were getting the shit kicked out of them. And our British soldiers hadn't come up at all yet to help them. At night, we'd go on boats, we'd go across and to patrol and see if we could get in contact with the British soldiers, our paratroopers. And we did, and we'd bring some of the guys back that were wounded. And I remember I made 2 trips at night over there. And then we just settled down to hold this railroad that was also crossing the bridge on to Arnhem to where Germany was, right across from the bridge. We were there just to hold that and go back and open the supply line again. That was our job then, and we stayed there in the front lines from September, so we jumped to late November. And there we lost some guys. In Holland we lost some guys, just like we did in Normandy, in different engagements with the damn Germans.
Did you lose any close friends during that time?
Oh yeah. Every time we went into combat, we'd lose somebody close.
You remember any of their names?
Well, I remember the ones that we lost in Normandy. And let's see, Matt was one of the guys. He was a Native American. He and Jackson. Let's see, Smitty. No, Smitty was killed in Bastogne. Warren Hill and Edward Mitchell, Litton. Those guys all survived the jump in Holland.
What type of an effect did it have on you losing your buddies along the way?
You know, the only thing that came to my mind was getting even. That it hurt, you know, but we didn't have time to mourn for very long, you know. I mean, you lose a buddy and you know you're not going to see him anymore, or you're not going to be having anything to do with him, and all you can think of is getting the bastard that got him, you know, some way or another with him. And I went from rifleman to a machine gunner. And our crew, the other two guys that were with me, we never lost anybody of our crew. Until we went into Bastogne. But we were up there in that line, like I said, from September. There was one time right out outside of a town called Orendorf that we went on a patrol with Lieutenant Kelly. And he put me out on the left flank of the patrol because when you go on patrol into enemy territory to make contact to find out where exactly that enemy is, you have to send out scouts in front of you and then flank guards, what they call flank guards. And I was on the left flank. And we stopped in this little town. I forget the name of the town itself, but I think it was Orendorf. And I was out maybe 200 yards or more from our platoon, our gang that was on patrol, our patrol. While I'm there, I'm under a tree, and up the road comes this half-track, German half-track, with camouflage in front of it, you know. And they stopped, and they saw the guys because they were out in front of a church. The main group of our scouts, or our patrol, were out in front of the church. So the half-track stopped, and I saw the commander that was on top go to his field glasses, and he was looking right straight at our group of guys, you know, and he never saw me because I was under a tree, a shade of the tree, you know. And when he started giving orders, I said, "I got you, mother." And I put the first shot at him. And of course, I started emptying, you know, just firing at the bunch and at the half-track. By this time, we were using what they call armored piercing bullets in our rifles, you know. He jumped, and I thought I missed him. I thought, I didn't hit that some. And pretty soon, the guys started coming back around to try to get the half-track started firing at him again. And they ran around a fence. So they disappeared. Then the other two guys on this side of the half-track ran across the road. And I fired at them, but I didn't hit them. In fact, I didn't think I hit anybody. By this time, this guy from the patrol, the rest of the patrol comes up. "What's going on? What's going on?" I said, "That's going on, right? Fuck." So we go over there. Two of the guys were right behind the fence, were dead. The commander that I shot at had run a couple of yards, about 50 yards, and fell face forward. I had hit him too. And there was a guy on the side of the half-track that I hit too. All the time I thought I had missed them because of the way they were running. And when Lieutenant Kelly comes up and the rest of the patrols, they start wiping out. Well, they start going after the guys that had run into the field across the road, which was about 3 of them that they never find. And they went after them. They never found them. And he said, well, good job, Martinez. And this guy named Ralph Fox looked at me and said, Martinez, you all right? I said, yeah. You know what? He says, I didn't think you had it in you. What do you mean? He says, well, we lost you in Normandy. You know, I never heard anything about you. I said, well, I got wounded in Normandy. I said, that's why you didn't hear anything about me. Do son of a bitch. So after that, I was a hero with them, you know. Some of the guys that, when you have a platoon of people, got 36 or, no, let's see, that's 40, there's 42 in a full platoon, there's 42 people. 36, not 42, 36. But sometimes they reinforced us with the heavy machine gunners. So you only know the guys that are in your squad, more or less, you know. The ones that are in another squad are not that close, or depending on the situation, just how close they get to you. So, although they're in the same platoon you are, the times that you're off someplace or not in combat, that you get to see them a little more, but you don't get that close to them like you would do to the next two guys next to you or in the same squad, you know. The ones that went with us, that went with me through the 3 campaigns, was Ray Taylor, Walter Litton, Warren Hill, Edward Mitchell, and Charlie Carr. Those were the guys that were really close to me. And they went they went through all the campaigns too, from Normandy into Berchtesgaden. The other ones that we lost were either replacements and, you know, guys that didn't get that close to you. Once we left Holland, which was late November, they took us back to Marmelon, France, to resupply us, to reinforce us, and then we were supposed to all go to Paris, supposed to get a pass to go to Paris. Well, we're in the process of doing that, and they had already sent some guys from our company to Paris. Then they would send us in groups. Then the rest of us would be preparing to go. Well, I think it was either the 17th or the 18th of December, around 2 o'clock in the morning, the charge of quarters, the guy that's in charge of staying in the office overnight, and in case anything happens, you know, he can alert the company and stuff. And the guys that are coming in from pass check in, and they're accounted for. Came through our barracks and turned the lights on and started yelling at us. Go down to the supply room and get your battle gear. You're going back into combat. What? You're having a nightmare, man. Go back to your sleep. Go back to your quarters, you know. Turn the lights on. Turn the radio on. See what's happening, man. The Germans had broken through the lines in Belgium. Where the fuck's this at? You know, we hadn't heard of Belgium yet. You know, so we said, "You have a nightmare? Fuck back to sleep, man. You better look at the camp. Look out the windows. Turn the radio on. Look out the windows, man." Well, by this time, all the lights in the camp were on, and there were cattle trucks coming up to the front of our company area. Well, we went to the supply room, got our equipment, you know, battlefield equipment. And here we go again. And we got our overcoats on, you know, and they loaded us up in these trucks. They loaded the whole platoon in one truck. We headed out. Where the fuck are we going? And this one guy, Mancuso, Joseph Mancuso, said, "Boy, you didn't get me go to Paris. Wait till I get one of those damn heinies. I want to tell him, where the fuck do you think you were going, man?" And that night, following night, we got to Bastogne, the outskirts. We saw the sign, Bastogne. Well, we know where we're at now, Bastogne, wherever that is. And we saw some of the other troops started coming out that were beaten most of the time. They were beaten real bad, and they weren't saying very much, except they said, "Oh, you guys are here. What are you guys doing?" "Well, we're going in there to stop this hole you guys created, you know." What we didn't know at that time was that our lines, our lines of combat in that area of the Ardennes were really thin, because everybody else was on leave for Christmas. They had already left for Christmas, you know. And that's why those guys got overrun so bad. You know, the Germans pulled a real surprise attack on us, man. I mean, they threw everything at us except the kitchen sink. In fact, I think they threw that too, because they dug in real deep into Belgium on tanks, you know. And they were headed for Bastogne, because that was a railroad head there, so they could use the rails, you know. And their objective was to get to Antwerp in Holland, to get that port, to get our supplies. That's where we were getting our supplies brought in, through that port in Antwerp. Well, we went into Bastogne, started settling it up. What the hell is this going? That pretty soon they said, "We're surrounded." What? The last truck that went out of here after they dropped us was cut off by the Germans, and they cut off the road, and they already formed a perimeter around us in Bastogne. So somebody made a remark about, "Who the bastards, they got us surrounded, man." Well, paratroopers were used to being surrounded, you know. And the Germans didn't know who was thrown into Bastogne. Everything was happening so fast that they didn't know that there was an airborne outfit that was thrown in Bastogne.
You guys drove in, you didn't jump in.
No, we were driven in by truck. Where is that thing? What the hell did I do with it? I had it here, and I was going to show it to you. Oh, because this is some pictures that I was going to show you too. That I had from what was left over.
Pictures you took over there?
Yeah, those pictures that some from what was survived from Second World War, and then my second hitch was the 11th Airborne Division.
So this is where you guys were?
Yeah, that's the perimeter where the see there's the 506, the 502, all the way up here to the 501. And I had a position right here with a machine gun, this railroad. And all these little towns we had to clear out. But we were always on the outside of Bastogne. You know, we weren't in the headquarters was in Bastogne, but the rest of our units were all around, and we were called the battered bastards of Bastogne because we were in what they call a donut hole, the hole of the donut, because although the Germans had us surrounded, the American troops and English troops had the Germans surrounded. But for 10 days we held that perimeter there with what little food that we had, because again we always had a 3-day supply, 72-hour supply of food and ammunition. We had to have that. That was because we were supposed to be relieved within 72 hours after we jumped. That was what the setup with the Airborne was. Once you took your objective, and once the ground troops got there, you were relieved of that. You didn't fight anymore, which was dead wrong because we still, you know, like I said, in Normandy, the outfit was there about 30 days or more. And in Holland, we were over there 60-something days fighting. But the difference in Holland and Normandy, that we were getting supply, you know. While once we got into Bastogne, the weather was so bad, and it was in the winter time, and according to those people, it was the worst winter they had had. There was no way we could get resupply because our planes couldn't, because of the weather, our planes were grounded, and they couldn't get supplies to us. For the first 10 days, we ran out of ammunition. We started scrounging around the areas here where there were American tanks. We'd go into those tanks to try and get ammunition from there, if they had any unused ammunition, so we could get some for our machine guns and stuff. Now, I remember one time that a couple of us went to hunting for ammunition, and then we ran into this one tank that was been knocked out of our American tank. And I jumped up, and a couple of us went up and opened the turret to try and get into it. And there was an American all burned there. And boy, the stench that hit me, I'll never forget. So right away we got out of there, you know. And we still had to get some ammunition from our tanks, you know, and stuff that we could scrounge around. And scrounge around for food We were lucky that they had a burlap sack manufacturers there in Bastogne. So we got burlap sacks to put around our boots because of the snow that we were in. We were in snow up to our knees. And that caused a lot of casualties too, because a lot of those guys got frostbite and bad. So they ended up in the hospital, and we had a hospital set up there in Bastogne, but at night that bombed the Bastogne, and they almost wiped it out too. We were lucky, we say lucky, but not really, because we were always, every morning at dawn, the Germans would try and break through our lines. And every morning we had to fight them off. Every night at dusk, they'd start coming through with tanks, trying to break through our lines. Again, we had to stop them. And we did. We kept them at bay for 10 days. Then, and that was really hard, because one of our companies, Company F, was in the small town of Foy. And they got trapped there by Germans. So right away, E Company and F and D Company went out to bring them back, to help them out and bring them back out of that hole. We tried that. The first night that we tried it, somebody called us back and said our left flank was open and that we could get caught off in that heavy fight in that night. So they pulled us back to the main line of resistance. And that's the first time I ever cried, man. Because I was miserable, and they were letting these guys that were trapped in there get killed. You know. And right about the time that we were having these thoughts, and I was sitting down crying, word came by, says, we're going back in there and get those guys out. We got reinforcements, and we know our flanks are all right, and we're going back. So we did go back in there and got them, got the few of them out that we had. Well, then after that, we heard about another town farther north. I think it was Norville. Yeah, I think it was Norville. And by this time, we've lost a bunch of our guys because of the artillery shells that were coming into our place where we were dug in. They will hit the top of the pine trees and that splatter shrapnel all over us, you know. And some of them got direct holes into some of our foxholes that we got there. And we were in some of the holes that the Germans had built. So in some parts we were in almost where there would be 3 or 4 guys in that one hole, you know. That's where we lost a bunch of guys. And that's where Smitty got killed. During the time we were on the attack, trying to break out towards, you know, to get some of the other towns we had lost, and we tried to get out of there to try to go. And in one of those attacks, Smitty got killed, and Charlie Clark, Carr, and I were with our machine gun when this guy Cook came running back. Smitty got killed. Smitty got killed. I said, where the hell did you? Back there, back there. So I dropped the machine gun and picked up a rifle, and Charlie went with me to see where Smitty had gotten hit. So we got to Smitty. He was already dead. Well, we were trying to take him out of the snow, and we were going to take him back. I see this German coming across our front line before you get to the fire break. I got my rifle and I shot him. And Charlie, when he saw me fire at him, he says, "Man, Paul, you hit him?" He says, "Sparks just flew." Well, it wasn't that the sparks flew, it was that we were using tracer because of our machine gun. We had to take ammunition from wherever we could get it. So anyway, we got Smitty back to where our first aid was at. We went right back to the line and started up again, and the company was supposed to move across this fire break to another spot in the forest. Well, while we were in the process of that, half of the company had already reached the other side because we were in one line of. Part of the company was already on the other side of the fire break, and part of it was still in the fire break, and we were on this side. And all of a sudden, man, this stupid guy said, I don't forget who it was, said, "Man, this would be a nice place for us to get a bombardment right now, man. Look at those trees, the way they had been torn down." Sure enough, man, here comes the 88s and screaming mimes and started right on top of us. And hell, I got under a tree that had already been knocked down. I got underneath that, and then Sergeant Truex and our platoon headquarters, the guy was a radio, the communications, and our runner, our company runner, and Sergeant Truex were up ahead of us, and they got hit. We lost King. King was one of the guys that we lost there, and Guggenberger was the other one that got hit. Those were the guys that with the radio and the communications were. Sergeant Truex was back talking to us when this other guy, one of our replacements, jumped up and started running and said, "We're all going to get killed. We're all going to get killed." He came by me, so I tackled him, and then Sergeant Truex jumped on top of him too, and we held him down, and there were still artillery still coming in on us. After a while, the artillery stopped, and the kids underneath us, scared to death. We weren't any better, but we finally got the word to go ahead and cross the damn fire break and get to join the rest of the company and set up in that area again for defense, you know. It was the following day that we hit this railroad, and we set up our machine gun right at the side of the railroad. The following morning, here comes the Germans, and they already had white sheets, and winter equipment. So you're looking at the fog of this, and you're looking at this ghostly figures coming down towards you, and they're Germans, you know. So naturally, I opened up on them, you know, and we repelled that breakthrough that's coming through there. Then in the evenings, they would do the same thing. Once the sun went down, the tanks, you could hear the tanks rolling, knocking down trees and start coming towards us. Then we start opening fire and start stopping them again with what we had. And by this time, we were running completely out of ammunition. And the following day, by this time it's almost, in fact, it was almost Christmas Day, I think, when the weather finally broke through and the clouds cleared and the planes were able to fly. Then the first thing we saw was some P-47s coming up from behind us, going up and firing at the German troops across the fire break. We said, hey man, we got it made. And then we look up and our C-47s are coming up, starting to drop food and winter equipment for us and stuff. And believe it or not, they dropped us hot food.
Remember what the first meal you ate?
Turkey, corn, mashed potatoes, and gravy. That was our Christmas dinner.
And you hadn't eaten in
Well, we were eating soup, bean soup for 5 days. That's all we had. And let's say we found some rations in the tanks. Some people that had rations, we'd scrounge those, you know. And some of the people would give us some of their food that they had in their cellars, you know. That's how we were surviving. And when they started dropping everything on us, they started dropping medical stuff and galoshes for us so we could put over our boots, you know, so we could fight better in the snow. And more winter clothing, you know. So after that, we were living in heaven then. We were really, by this time, we had lost most of our company, though. The only officer we had was Captain McMillan. In one of those nights that we went in to take, in fact, it was the same night that these guys were trapped in Foy, that we went up into Norville afterwards. And we ran into some tanks, and Captain McMillan came up behind me and said, Martinez, pick up that ammunition for the bazooka. And the town is already burning and stuff. We're running through the burned buildings. I'm following him because he told me to follow him with the bazooka ammunition. And we finally stopped, and this tank is going through the street. And he says, load me up. So I threw a rocket in there and loaded him up, and he fired at the damn tank. The projectile hit the tank and off of it, you know, just bounced off of it.
Shit, yeah.
Then the following one, he hit the tracks. So that stopped the tank. So the rest of us guys, we took care of that tank and the people that were in it. That time we also had to take that town, then withdraw, come back to the main line of resistance again to wait for some more heavier, you know, tanks to attack. Then by this time, I think it was right after the weather cleared that Patton broke through to us. and they thought that we had been relieved in Bastogne, that we were coming back, you know. Well, they sent us back as far as Nancy, France, and then they got another idea that we should go back with the tanks that Patton had. And we went into Haguenau, Germany. By this time, we went into Haguenau, Germany, and we held Haguenau, Germany for, I don't know, I forget how many days we were there, but 2-night patrols went across the Rhine again in combat, and this time we were going to get some prisoners, which we did.
You're going to liberate American prisoners?
Yeah, no, to get some German troops, prisoners, so we could find out who we were fighting.
To get information.
Yeah, get information from them. Then after that, we did get relieved in Haguenau.
Did you guys capture any
Oh yeah, we captured a couple of them.
Can you talk about that experience? How do you approach that even?
Well, the thing is that we were in there at night, and we just caught them, and we just pushed them back, you know, and get ahead of us, and we guard them and brought them back into our area. That was our job, you know. Other than that, they would go. We'd take them to headquarters, and they would interrogate them over there. We'd search them, get whatever they had, souvenirs, but that was about it. That was our job. I mean, we didn't have to worry about interrogating them to see. We like I said, we just capture them, bring them in, and take them to headquarters, and let the interrogators over there that spoke German deal with them.
So you'd fire at them with the intention of not trying to kill them. How would that work exactly?
Well, with the main thing was not to fire at them.
Yeah, okay.
Main thing to do is try to approach them to where we could capture them without any hassle, because we weren't that strong. We would get into a firefight, we'd lose. Because you're talking about 5 men going in there with small arms.
You don't know how many you're potentially going against.
No, you're going to find out where their outposts are, because most of your outfits will have an outpost. And our job was to go to where we thought those outposts were, listen in, and see what you could hear, and then jump as quietly as we could. That was when we went out on patrol to pick up prisoners. When you went out on a combat patrol, it was entirely different. You were armed, plenty of ammunition and stuff. Your job was to open fire and find out how much fire you could get back, how much resistance you would run into on a combat patrol. That was a different type of patrol.
Now, most of the patrols that you went on, were they mainly just a few hours or a day, or were you out?
In the night, no. At night, you got to have to come back before dawn. Yeah. But in the combat patrols, that would go out in the evening, and they may not come back right away, you know. And if they had to, we'd have to go after get them out of there. There was a lot of how can I explain that? There was really no time to analyze anything, you know. There wasn't any time to try to break it down. You had orders to go do this, you had orders to go do that, and that's what you went to do. were sent out to knock out a tank, that's what you went to do. Without no questions, you know. And the leaders that we had were the type of guys that would jump up and say, you and you, follow me, you and you go with so-and-so. And we'd form 2 units to go like in a pincer movement to go after a patrol or a gun emplacement or a machine gun emplacement that was really giving us trouble. Or one time we ran into a damn tank that was dug in Holland. We ran into a tank that was dug in. And that sucker, we saw it come down with his 88 and pointed at us, and we scattered. We called for a tank destroyer from the British, which were our support, heavy support. The British tank destroyer came up, took one shot at the damn tank. The shot bounced off the tank. The British tank destroyer, turned around and took off and left us. So we had to go in there with bazookas and knock it out. But that was part of the day, you know what I mean? That was things you got to do, and you did them automatically. You did them like a robot, more or less. That's how well we were trained to do, you know. And if we lost the leader, then we could step up and take charge, you know, because we knew what we were supposed to do, where our objective was, and we were trained to. If somebody went down, you'd have to take their place. You took their place, you know. And mostly you jump from being a rifleman onto a machine gunner, and go into a machine gun crew, and then from there go into a leadership type of position, which would make you either a squad leader and so on. And with the way our leaders were shot down was because every time they had some orders to shout, they'd stand up, and those were the first ones the Germans would kill or knock out. And then the next the sergeant in charge would get up and take charge, and then if something happened to him, the next guy in line would go. But we were trained like that from day one. We went from Bastogne. They took us back to France, and we were no sooner there that they decided that they were going to jump paratroopers across the Rhine River. By this time, they had already dropped paratroopers in the southern part of France, and they were working their way up from the southern part of France. They jumped the 13th and 17th Airbornes across the Rhine River. We went in as ground support for them.
Was that for Operation Varsity?
I forget what that operation was, because all we did was get into half tracks and run up as in support of the paratroopers. We bypassed their drop zones and started chasing Germans all the way back to Germany. By this time, the Germans was en route, you know, and our job was to keep them that way. So we ended up going into Germany and stopping for rest in a town or so, and then kept right on going all the way into Birch's Garden. once we got into Birch's Garden, we met very little resistance. And I don't know if you've seen Band of Brothers. As you know, that the E Company taking all the credits for all that. Well, they forget to mention D Company, which was right alongside of them. But we were in Birch's Garden. The 2nd Battalion took, which is F Company, Dog Company, and E Company. Only in different spots, you know. But we all ended up in the same place, up in the Eagle's Nest. And boy, we stayed drunk for 3 days. Well, we hit all the goodies that Hitler had hidden up there, you know. We had bottles of cognac in our big bottles, in our pans, cognac and champagne. We were living like kings up there in that place. That's where I got busted.
What happened then?
They caught me looting without saluting, and I lost my sergeant's stripes, my first sergeant's stripes. I was very much to hold in stripes, you know. I could do my thing, and I could help others do their thing. I mean, if I saw somebody in trouble, of course I'd help them, you know. We got used to it after Normandy, that we started getting replacements, which they call replacements, but there's no way you could replace the guys that you went in and were together for so many years, you know. Like the guys that out of Toccoa, hell, we were together all the way through to England, you know, and into Normandy, and part of us into Holland and Bastogne. But that's where I was. We were there when, in fact, a couple of us got leave and went back to England. And when we got into England, the Japanese surrendered, which was in May, in August of 45. And we were just hit London when this big old fire, people had fire and hollering that the war was over in Japan and everything else, man. Which was something else, because when we were in Birch's Garden, they started getting the guys to go home that had the highest points. By points was the amount of time you spend in combat, you know. Some of the guys that came in after Bastogne, that came in as replacement with us, were shipped back, were in droves to go to Japan, to finish up the war in Japan. Well, the suckers came by here to the United States. By the time they got over there, the war was over. And we were still stuck in Europe, waiting to come home.
So there was no chance that you would have ended up in the Pacific. They would have sent the...
Oh, no. I was one of the high pointers. I got shipped out of Birch's Garden around, I would say middle part of November. But the thing was that as small groups, we were sent back to France, and they had certain areas, camps, where you would be there till they found a ship to put you on, so it's sort of like a marshalling area. And we were close to Marseille friends waiting for a ship to finally bring us home. And we got on a Liberty ship, which about 10 times smaller than the ship we went over in, because we went over in a liner, British liner. You could hardly feel any, motion of the ocean, And in this Liberty ships, they were small. We hit a storm about 3 days out of Newport News, Virginia. Everybody on that boat was sick. And I mean, we couldn't hold nothing down. And some of the crewmen were sick. That was that bad. Before we got into Newport News. But then we got it in there. That's when I stopped smoking. Because I couldn't take a drag of a cigarette without barfing. And I came back to Fort Sam Houston, where I had been inducted. And I got processed to get discharged. And I got discharged on the 10th of December, 1945. I got 15 cents for travel pay. At that time, when you were inducted, you would go to where you were inducted for. Then they'd find out how far you were lived from there, and they gave you traveling money to get back home. And according to what it would cost, Well, the bus would have cost me 15 cents to get home, because I was only 15 miles from Fort Sam Houston.
So that's what they gave you.
Yeah, but my poor mother was there waiting for me when I got out. I got discharged. And we caught a cab from Fort Sam Houston back into town.
How did you feel when you were in Europe and the war had ended there? What was your feelings?
Well, like I said, we were relieved to no end, man. I mean, it's a happy feeling, and at the same time, it's a sad feeling, because you start thinking about how many of you there was when you went in the service, and how many of us are returning, Like, out of my group, of the guys that went in with me, I was the only one that came back on this point system, high point system. Joe Herrera, who was also the only other guy that passed the high points that we needed to in order to be trained as paratroopers. The IQ for a soldier was 139. That was the score you had to have a perfect score. And you had to score 110, and then you were eligible to go to Officers Candidate School. But to be a paratrooper, you had to have at least an 85 or 90. Otherwise, they'd transfer you out of there, put you in a different outfit. And I think that was because they had to be able to train you, and that you had to understand everything that you read, and because a lot of it was book learning, and a lot of especially your weapons and stuff, you could go to different schools after that, with your IQ. You could qualify to go to medical school or something else like that, if you wanted to.
Now, how do you think the war shaped you as a man? I mean, you were a young kid when you went in. How do you feel it affected the rest of your life after getting out?
You know, I'm glad you asked that question. Because I came out with a big chip on my shoulder, man. I mean, when I got discharged in 45, and the first thing that came to mind, you know, they had what you call the 52 club. You got $50 for 52 months. And I figured to go back to school, but then when I went to school and I saw all these kids, I would have to go back to the 10th grade to finish the 10th grade. And well, you can imagine what you would feel like. You at this point, you're 3 years older than when you left. You're already a killer. And with the training you had, that was all that you could do. So there was no way I was going to go back to school. I did try to go to college, to a photographer college, which was funded by the GI Bill, you know, that we had. I could have done that, but I sort of didn't care to get to some of the jobs that they offered me. Like, since I had no skills of any kind, when I went to the unemployment office, they gave me a test to how to put little blocks here and this and that, you know. And they told me I was skilled with my hands, you know. I was all right with my hands as far as that went, you know. All the time, I did not know that I had this traumatic stress.
PTSD?
Yeah. But I didn't know that. I didn't feel depressed or anything like that. What I felt was anger or... and the first job that they gave me from the unemployment office was, because I was good with my hands, was with a corrugated manufacturer factory that was there in San Antonio. And I went to work there, and I just got pissed off because they had me unloading corrugated sheets from a boxcar. And I mean, these sheets were big, and you'd have to put them on a pallet, then take them to where the machines were, so they could work on them and make boxes out of them. That didn't work worth it there. So I decided that the best thing for me to do was go back into the service. So in early 47, I took off and re-enlisted again. And this time I said, instead of going back to Europe, I'll go to the occupation in Japan. So that's what I did. But in between that, I met that girl there. And I met her through her brother. Her brother and I had gone to school at the same time. And that was her younger brother. I had two other brothers, and all three of them served in the Air Force, and they were in Saipan at the same time, all of them. At the war, when the war ended, they were up in Saipan, in the Air Force. So through him, I met her. And at that time, I decided that that would be the best thing for me to go into the service and try and get some money together, so I could give her a good life, because I didn't have nothing else to do. But I was going to make it a career. I was going to make the Army a career. While I was in Japan, I went to Air Transportability School. That's where I got my glider wings, and I got a certificate that I could become a jump master. I got my jump master wings, and I could drop equipment at any given spot, to make sure that I could drop it at a place where it was supposed to land. They taught you a lot about wind drift, rate of descent of certain parachutes, and certain weights that you had to drop, and how to read a ground wind with smoke bombs that they would set in the drop zones. That's where you were going to drop them, and you could read how bad the wind was. So if you saw it was too damn bad, you didn't drop your man in there. You take them around some other place, take them back to the airfield. This was during training jumps, So that's what I learned in that school. And that wasn't anything that I could use in civilian life either, I thought I could. But anyway, while I was in Japan, I was writing to this young girl, and we really, made plans for our future.
What was her name? What is her name?
Juanita Lopez Tamés. So I spent 2 years in Japan, and while I was in Birch's Garden, we had a place called Zelensee, Austria, which was a lake, big lake, and we could go swimming there in the summertime. In fact, that's part of the time we went. Then we had up in the mountains, they had a skiing lodge. So, hell, when I found out that they were sending a couple of guys up there, I told them, hey, I want to go learn how to ski too, So, at this time, I had a girlfriend there in Kaprun, Austria. Her brother-in-law was a guy the German was in charge of the skiing lodge up there, So when we went up there, we'd go up by this sky lift that would take you all the way to a certain place, drop you off, and then you'd go around to where the skiing lodge was. And we got to take our girlfriends. The officers didn't know this, we knew, and since my girlfriend's brother-in-law was the one that was in charge up there, which he wasn't a Nazi. Right away, he made that clear. But this Tucker was a ski champion of the Olympic Games in '39. One of the Austrian. Oh yeah, he was one of the champions. skiers for Germany, for Germany, representing Germany. So he's the one that taught us how to ski up there.
Who better to learn from?
Yeah. So we spent a week up there, and we also went mountain goat hunting. Because those mountains were beautiful, man, and this sheep, the goats that were there, they were big suckers, man. Because I got one, and we ate it up there. He fixed it up for us after we killed it, you know. And using the same common ammunition that we were using in combat, and the M1s, with the armored piercing bullet would go right through them. And when I was shooting at this one goat, the first time I shot at it, it disappeared, you know. I said, "My, I hit it." And pretty soon it popped out again. I missed that sucker. Took another shot at it, and disappeared again, and pretty soon it appeared again, you know. And finally, with a third shot, I must have hit it in the head, and it went down. When I went over there, when we went over there, so it was the other guys that were with me, went over there, said, "Shit, Martinez, you hit it more than once, look." And sure enough, I hit it every time, but the bullet had gone right through it, and didn't hit any vital spot, I guess, you know. But anyway, I got it. The guy that was in charge up there, he dressed it and cooked it for us, and we were having a good time there for a week. Then we had to come back down to go on duty, and at that time we were pulling duty 24 hours guard and 72 hours off, and they were sending guys in small groups to visit, where they want to go visit in Austria. And you didn't have to, the only thing that you were not allowed to was to fraternize with the women there. But we ran into a couple of slave camps that the Germans had. And of course there were people from Poland, from Czechoslovakia, from France, from Spain. There were some people in those camps that got caught during the war. And they were not the one famous, infamous.
The Auschwitz.
Yeah, there wasn't that one of those camps, because they didn't have no gas chambers. But there's people in those camps that we liberate were starving.
You encountered them during World War II?
During the time we went in there, when we went into Austria.
And what did the people look like in there?
Sad, man. I mean, like skeletons. And stunk. Went to one of the camps and it was stunk like crazy. And we just had to bypass it, to call the headquarters to come in and check it out and see what the hell they could do with those people. So our headquarters was already getting people that were part of the military government that were going to take over the complete occupation of the country and set up a government for our side, military government. So they took care of those things, for us. We just bypassed those places. But that was before we hit Zellamzee and Birch's Garden.
So how many more years did you stay in the Army for after you had re-enlisted?
From 47 to 52.
the occupation of Japan for how long?
Well, the occupation of Japan, we stayed in there till 1949. We came back in 49, and we opened Fort Campbell, Kentucky, which is now the home of the 101st Airborne Division now.
So after you were discharged, 52, you said, correct?
Yeah.
What did you do after that?
I came home with my wife.
Started a family?
Yep.
How
We
many
had
kids?
already started the family.
Yeah. How many kids did you have?
Well, at the time that I got discharged, I only had the two older boys and my girl. No, only two boys. The two oldest boys I had. We had because Mother and I, we got married in Fort Campbell, Kentucky. Her father brought her up to Fort Campbell, and we got married there. And then our first boy was born there. My first boy is up there. He went airborne too. He's an Army brat. He's got a certificate as an Army brat. Then our second boy was born in San Antonio, Texas. He went in the Air Force during the Vietnam War. He and the eldest one, they both served during the Vietnam War. The eldest one went into the Airborne, into the 101st. But they sent him on a special mission to Cambodia under one of those secret ops that they had at that time. Then Carlos was born in Kentucky. Then Mario, the second one, he was born in Texas. Then my girl was born in Chicago. Then we came to California, and this guy was born here, and his younger brother was born here.
And what did you end up doing for work?
Work, I worked as mostly as a manager of warehousing, because I was good. I was always been good in figures. You know, I could always calibrate or do things like that. The first job I got here in California. Well, the first job I got in San Antonio was with a paper factory. There I learned how to. They taught me how to run a patent press that make small boxes, like for your where you find your candies, chewing gum, and stuff like that. That's what I learned to do there, and make different boxes and cut dies for them, different shapes of dies for different shapes of boxes that you needed. And I worked there for a while, and in 53, the early part of 54 is when my brother got killed here. And I told the people that I worked with that I was going to have to come over here. And my dad at that time was living in Chicago with the second family. And the manager that I had there at the factory told me, "No, you can't go." I said, "What do you mean I can't go?" I said, "I just told you. My mother needs me over there in California, because my mother and sister and my brother were the only ones that were living here. So I told her, I gotta go." He said, "Well, if you go, you lose your job." "Take your job, shove it up your ass." And I came home and told my wife what was going on, and she says, "Oh no, you didn't lose another job." I said, "Well, and this, you know what happened?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, my dad's coming in from Chicago, and we're headed for California to see." But Mom, helping Mom go through this. This is my brother. So I was here for maybe 2 weeks after Mother settled down and my sister were okay, and I saw that they were okay, and I had to go back to my family, you know. So I went back over there, and I was in the process of getting my job back with that company that I had worked with, you know. And they told me, "Yeah, we can give you some part-time job, but you won't be doing the same thing you were doing." I said, "Well, whatever it is, you know, whatever it is, give me whatever." So they got to, I got a job with a slitter and slider, what they call a slitter and slider. That's when you set up your knives, but then your scorer, set them up in a certain place. They give you the work program. You got to set them up, and then you take a sheet of cardboard, you throw it through there, and that cuts it to the size that you want, scores it the way you want it. Then it goes through the main printing press, and they print whatever they're going to store in those boxes, you know. And I was getting $1.09 an hour. I was working 10 hours a day in order to make do for the family. In Texas, they had the right to work law, and they didn't have to pay you except what they wanted to pay, you know. Well, my brothers came to visit some cousins in San Antonio. This is my second family, you know. And when they came to see us, just my wife and I and the kids, so, "What are you doing, brother?" I said, "Well, I'm doing this job, but I got to do this, and they're paying me shit." Says, "Hell, you can go to Chicago with us, and you get a better job over there. The pay is better over there." I looked at my wife and I said, "What do you think, hon?" "Might as well." So we packed up the little pickup truck that my brother had, threw in our washing machine and a few other belongings, and here we go to Chicago. So I had to move in with my brother, the one that actually follows my sister, because he was the firstborn to my dad after he left us. So he was Bob was about 10 years younger than I was. So right away, I got a job over there with doing what I was doing here with a corrugated company. And I really fell in good because I could speak Spanish, and over there they had a bunch of Puerto Ricans that were laboring there in that company, So I went in there as a lead man. And my pay was a hell of a lot better. I was getting $3.65, I think, an hour with them over there. So we were doing pretty good until a union started to come in there. And they got to me because I was the supervisor of our group, there. And I could speak in Spanish, so I could speak to those guys and tell them that, that it was good for the Union to come in. Well, they made the mistake of taking me to the headquarters there in Chicago. They took me to their headquarters, and the guy that was trying to bring the Union into our shop, took me up there so I could meet one of the head honchos, so he could tell me what I was going to be doing and how much money I was going to be making more, So I sat outside in the waiting room, and the office is right here, and I could hear what those guys were talking about in here, The guy that took me in there meant well, but the guy that was behind the desk had other ideas. So I heard him tell him, well, you didn't promise him this, you promised that. Yeah, he says, I did. Well, we're going to need him as a troubleshooter in another shop, We can use him that way. Don't you go promise him. I heard this as shit. I just walked out. I didn't even go meet him. So the guy came back and told me, he says, hey man, how come you walked out? I said, because of what you guys were talking. I'm not going to do this. Sell this guy down the drain. I said, you guys are going to make your money, and you're going to take money from these guys, and you're not going to give them any more raise than what they already got. So I'm not going with you. So they got pissed off, and I got pissed off. I said, you know what? I told the guys that I had, the employers that I had under me, I told them what was going on. I said, it's up to you guys. You want the union to come in, go ahead. I don't want it. Well, they said, yeah, they want it. I said, okay. Get your 3 cents a year, and 10 cents in the next 10 years. You'll get a raise, So I quit. And I went to work for medical mailing. They had an opening. I saw in the paper. They needed lead man there. You spoke both languages, so I went to work for medical mailing, and I did pretty well there until we got the bug that my wife wanted to come up to California because of the weather. When it gets hot in Chicago, it gets hot and humid. When it gets cold, it gets miserably cold in Chicago. And by this time, my kids, Carlos would have started going to school about that time, And she says, I can't see my kids walking in that to school. I says, well, do you want to go back to San Antonio, or do you want to go to California? Meanwhile, my sister is calling us to come on out here, It's just, hell, you could get a job over here. And one of her, my mother was babysitting one of the girls' kids there in the same, they lived here in Lincoln Heights. And in Lincoln Heights, right across from Pep Blue Ribbon Brewery on Main Street, there was a yard there of people that had like equipment for construction. And then there were, next to that, there were 5 units for rent. And my mother lived in one of them next to the last unit, which was a two bedroom units. All of them were 2 beds units, small kitchen, small living room. So I had to wait till one of them was vacated before we could move. Otherwise, we were living with my mother and sister, and 2 kids and my wife. 3 kids by this time, and the baby. She was 6 weeks old when I brought her out here. This girl, she was 6 weeks old when I brought her out here. And as soon as that we got an opening, sure enough though, this guy that my mother was babysitting her kids. He got me a job in 10 days where he was working. He was working for Haywood Wakefield furniture manufacturers, which made real furniture out of real wood. I forgot what they called that wood, man, but you could home it and it would last forever. And I went in there and started putting boxes, drawers together for the furniture. You know, was my job, putting them together. And I kept watching this guy over here, and I kept watching this guy in the machine. Well, his job was to shape the wood that you would use for the furniture. And I saw what he was doing, you know. So he decided to go on a drunk. And then the manager was, you know, they were falling back on some of the woodwork that they needed. So I told him, I said, what's the matter? He says, I can run it. You can run it? I said, yeah. Come on. So he says, this is the worksheet here. This is what you got to do for this wood. I said, well, you got to set the machine this way, and you got to do this, you got to do that. And I said, you got a knife for that? They had guys that would have the knives. They had rollers that when you run the wood through, they would shape them, you know, the way you want it shaped. So I got that job, doing that, and pretty soon I was making my own knives to shape the wood, you know. So I had a job there. I was making $4 an hour. Man. So we were doing real good. In November of the same year, rainy cats and dogs, man. I mean, it'd been raining for days, you know. I hear a knock on the door, my little old hut over there where I was at, you know. I opened the door and here's this guy. He says, hi, Paul. The manager that I had over there in medical mailing in Chicago, the manager that I had up there came to see me. I looked at him and said, Gene, what the hell are you doing here? He says, oh man, I says, come on in, you know. He says, so how you doing, Paul? I said, oh, well, okay, you know. So I sat him down and said, you want some coffee? And Mario, my second son, was about yay high, you know. He said, you want some agua? You want water? No, Gene said, what did he say? He says, you want some water? Oh, no, okay. So the sucker had come to take over Krupp direct mailers out here in East Los Angeles and on Pico Boulevard. They had brought him from he answered an ad from Chicago, and he came to take over the whole operation of mailing, which he was capable of doing. But right away he noticed that he was going to run into opposition. So he came to me. And he said, how much you making over there? So I told him, I said, I'm making them. Well, he says, I can't promise you too much more, it's just, but I can, you know, give you a 4.5 for now. And within 90 days, I can raise your pay. He says, but I'm going to need you to run my hand mailing department like you were over there in Chicago. Well, the mailing over here was entirely different than over there. because over there, all we did was mail stuff to the profession, to the doctors, or anything that came out from the chemical companies, or you know that you could buy prescription drugs of a certain kind, and advertising like that was what we were sending to doctors and hospitals and stuff, you know. But over here it was entirely different. They were mailing all kinds of mail, advertising all kinds of toys or stuff like that, you know. And when he told me he wanted me to go work with him, I said, well, is this it? I mean, this is what I'm going to get? He said, well, you'll get more money as we grow. So needless to say, I worked for him for 7 years, till he started loading me up with much work and didn't live up to paying me what he was going to pay me. You know?
Started taking advantage of
Yeah.
him.
Because they were taking advantage of him, or so I thought. Anyway, one day I had to go in there and says, I got to talk to you, Gene. I got to get a raise. You know. By this time, we had moved up here to Aldama, and I had taken a house, beautiful house room, and it cost me more money to rent, you know. So I told him, I says, I got this plans, and he says, well, what do you expect? I mean, he says, I said, well, you just gave me more people to work with, and you're not going to give me a raise? He said, well, I can't do it right now. You'll have to wait. I said, no, I'm not going to wait anymore. You already got me doing this job. You got me doing that other job, and now you want me to do this? Nah, I mean, that's not going to work here. Here's the keys to the joint, man. So I walked off and I come home. My wife said, what are you doing home so early? Oh no, Paul, not again. I said, yeah. He says, well, what are we going to do now? I said, don't worry about it. I'll get me another job. Within 10 days, I saw an opening in Sweatlow Industries. They had a government contract, and they were making shells for 16 millimeter shells for the Navy. And you had to calibrate all of that stuff, you know, and you had to know what the hell you were doing. I learned to run a lathe, and I was doing good there too. Then in 1970, the Navy canceled their contract with Sweatlow, and they had to shut down the place. So we all got laid off. Well, I came home and I told my wife. He said, again? I said, yeah, don't worry. I'll look at the paper and find a job. Well, like I said, I was good at figures. I was good at holding inventory of things, you know. I saw a job opening here in Glendale with Corey Coffee, the Corey Coffee Company. I said, what the hell is this? They want a warehouseman there, you know. That's how bad could that be, you know. So I went and applied for it, and the guy liked me right away, the owner. He says, let me show you what we're talking about. They had all sort of coffee, different kinds of coffee, different brands, different brands of coffee. They had coffee machines that would go into the offices, you know. And I told him, I said, well, hell, I can handle this shit. You want a clean warehouse, right? You have to have a clean warehouse because we were using sugar, we were using creamers and coffee pots that we had to keep clean, you know, to supply the offices with. So I felt, you know, right at home with them, and I was getting good pay. Just a whole warehouseman, manager. And I worked with them for, to 80, no. Yeah, I worked with them for about 4 or 5 years, from 70, 74, 75. And these guys that were supplying corrugated boxes to us, they were taking the boxes that Hershey would send us with creamers. They were taking those boxes, and in those boxes, they rewash all the decanters, glass decanters, and they put them in those boxes, and then they would send them to the different places where they delivered the coffee, you know. And I had to be in charge of taking the orders and pack all the orders and where they were going, you know. And every time those guys came back with the decanters, there were a bunch of broke, you know. Oh shit, there got to be a way to stop this breakage of this decanters. So, get my mind to working. I said, hell, I can design a box that'll fit like a 6-pack, and design it to where you could put the decanters and you have less breakage. And if we have it coated, you know, we could, it would wear longer, you know. So I told my the owner of the plant, I said, look, Bob, I can design this box for you this way, and you'd save a lot more on the decanters. He says, yeah, you're right, you know. So he got a hold of this Marfret manufacturer, corrugated manufacturers, and he told him that he wanted this box. Well, right away, they said, well, who designed this box for you? Where did you get this idea? He says, our warehouse manager. He says, you did? She said, yeah, that's where I got it from. So this guy, this owners from Marfret Company, Fred, came over one day to see and saw the warehouse, how neat it was. And then he eased up on me and says, did you design this box for this carrier like this? I said, yeah. He said, well, where did you get that experience? So I told him where I ran a patent press and stuff, you know. And I said, that's where I got the experience as far as boxes are concerned. I said, and as far as warehousing, I said, I've learned that through these days, you know. How would you like to come and work for me? I said, what? He says, I need a warehouse manager, a shipping and receiving manager. By this time, Hershey was buying out Corey Coffee, and And Bob Winters, the owner, came and told me what was going on and what was going to happen, you know. I said, well, they're going to start bringing in their own people in here. I said, and I'm down here, you know, in the warehouse. They can replace me if they want to. He says, but no, it's not necessarily. He says, and besides, I can give you more overtime and get you more pay, you know. And besides that, you know, so you don't have to worry. I says, nah, I don't think so. I've seen this happen before, you know, where somebody else comes and takes over, brings their own people in, front and back. So I went to talk to Fred, and I told him, what kind of deal are you going to give me with? He said, well, I already know how much you're making out there, because he had already found out as to how much I was making. I said, well, I'm going to need to travel pay, and, you know, I said, I'm going to be driving a lot farther. So you're going to have to make it worth my while. So he says, well, you wouldn't be here if you weren't interested. I said, oh, okay. I'll think it over. What you offer me, I'll think it over. Well, I came home and I figured out what kind of mileage I was going to be going, how much wear and tear in the car and all that stuff, you know. So I was making $4 over here an hour. So I went back and I told him, I said, well, what are you offering me? He says, well, I'll give you 6.5 an hour. As manager, you know. He says, well, and you, at the end of the year, if we go good, you'll get a bonus. So much, you know. I said, well, okay. So I gave my notice over here with Bob. I told him, I said, you're going to have to get a replacement because I'm going over there because they offered me this and they offered me that. He says, well, I can't hold you back, Paul. He says, you got a family to feed and you know what you need and what you want. I said, well, I appreciate it. So we parted company, you know. I went to work for them. And at that time, he had a shipping manager and a receiving manager. Right away, the receiving manager, he received me real good. I mean, the kid was all right. But the shipping manager was an asshole. And I'm saying that because within 2 weeks, I heard of what he had done, you know, to try. They had bets as to how long I was going to last as a warehouse manager because they had run the last one out in no time at all. Guy couldn't take the shit, you know. So once I got set in and they told me what my job was, once the boss told me, this is what your job is. This is what your main thing is to receive and store where everything belongs, stuff, and keep this warehouse clean. His job is just shipping. Filling orders, filling the trucks, and sending them out. I said, okay. Well, these guys would come in earlier than we did in order to get their trucks loaded and send out to where they were going with boxes and packing stuff, which the difference in that warehouse over there was packing and mostly things that you use, plastic bags of all sizes, those bubble wraps to pack, and boxes of all sizes, from 4x4 boxes to big boxes, you know. So every morning for the first week I'd come and I'd find a pallet dump out to the side and the bands on the boxes broken and right in the way of where our receiving guys would have to go in with their forklifts to put the stuff away or done. But before they could do that, they had to clean up those mess. And I told the receiving manager, I told him, I said, well, what's going on over here? Why are they do? He says, well, what's his name? Is this? And I tell him about it. He tells me to go fuck myself. As he does, huh? It's okay. Next morning, I come and find the same thing. So I go into the little office where all these crew is, the guys that load the trucks and stuff, you know. And I go into his office, I says, hey, get one of these guys off their ass and go over and clean up that fucking mess you got over there. Huh? What do you mean? What? My guys didn't do it. Get these guys out there and clean that fucking place up. He said, well, who do you think you're talking to? I says, who do you think you're talking to? I'm the manager of this fucking... My job is to keep this place clean and running. Your job is to ship. And that's it. I said, but you're not going to leave me no crap over here to clean up behind your ass. Well, we'll go see about that. We'll go to see the owner of the place, you know. So we'll go see Fred. I said, let's go. So we walked into Fred's office. Fred looked at him, looked at me, and says, what's up? And Larry, that was his name, starts it on Fred. This guy goes over here and tries to tell my crew what to do. And because this was dropped accidentally, he thinks he's going to go in there and tell my crew how to run this place. He says, he looked at him, Fred looked at him he says, he's in charge of the warehouse. It's his job to keep it close and keep everything in shape and clean so that you can have no trouble loading your trucks or getting your equipment and the stuff that you need into your trucks. So what he says goes. So we walked out of the office, coming back into the warehouse, and Larry's mumbling like crazy. It's goddamn Mexicans. And Fred looks at him, he says, hey, keep quiet. You do your job. You let Martinez do his job, and you let Jorgensen do his job. That was a receiving manager. But he was a young kid. He was big, husky, but he was young. And he had just gotten that position of being the receiving manager. And his job was to unload the trucks that were coming in from the manufacturers, the boxes that were made, and the stuff that was being delivered to us would come through him, and his job was to unload those trucks and put them away in the bins that we had. So, and he was deadly afraid of Larry. So I told him, I says, you know what? You don't have to be afraid of that son of a bitch. It gives you any court shit anymore. Tell him to come to see me. I hired a couple of kids that came looking for a job as for a forklift operators, you know. That we had put out for a forklift operator so they could do the shipping or the receiving. That's all their job was, to receive, unload the trucks, put them into the bins. Then I hired my brother, who was out of a job. He was living here. One of my brothers, half brothers. I hired him because he was a tool maintenance man, and his job in the Air Force was to keep all the stuff like ready for inventory at all times and in a set way, you know, so you could go and find anything that you needed. So I hired him, and I told him what I wanted. So that's all his job was until he was through with the whole warehouse, setting up our all our plastic bags were maybe this small, and so he had to put the size of them and put them in a certain place, then go up to the next size and so on. Do the same thing with the corrugated boxes, and he put up what was in certain places, what was in other places, and this way we could keep the inventory real good, you know. Mm-hmm. And Fred said, what the hell's, what are you doing? I said, well, you wanted this warehouse to run efficient, didn't you? I said, that's what I'm doing. He says, oh, because one of the guys went and complained that my brother wasn't doing nothing but writing numbers. And he came to find out why, you know. So I told him what was going on. I said, this way, you can come down here and find something right away. All you have to do is start at the smallest size and go to the larger size. Well, shit, then there was nothing he wouldn't do for me, you know. Yeah. I started getting tickets for the ball games. I started getting tickets to the shows downtown. And then we were really, I bought this house.
Did you retire there?
No. I got fired. What happened was that they were getting so big that they decided to make their own boxes instead of having them supplied by other box manufacturers. So he went to Germany and got this big ass machines down there, got into a real money deal with Germans, and he had to make room for, you know, so he had to drop most of our managers that were making X amount of money a year in order to be able to pay for those damn machines. So he took all of the managers that he had of different departments, and he gave us our walking papers with 3 months severance pay. And I never held it against him. I said, you made that deal. I said, but the other guys, the other managers that were there, they got fired. I said, what the fuck going on? This son of a bitch, I've been here for so many years. Yeah. Says, hey man, just you know, it happens.
It's business.
Business, you know. But within I would say I took it easy for a week. Was the money that I got anyway, you know. And mother was getting worried about, well, you're going to go look for a job. I says, well, you're tired of having me around the house, huh? She says, no, but you know you're going to have to get a job. That money ain't going to last forever. I said, yo, that's right. So I looked in the paper and saw that Public Storage was looking for a male department supervisor. I said, shit, that's right down my alley, you know, mailing. And it was right here, the headquarters right here in Pasadena. So I went down there and applied, put in my application, and my qualifications, as a resume that I got. And there are the schools that I attended, put down there jump school, Army, and this and that. And the girl that was the office manager there was a woman, I would say maybe in her 30s, I guess. She's good looking myself. But anyway, she saw the resume and she saw that I went to jump school. And right away she asked me, she says, how many jumps have you registered? So I told her so many, and there's this, and that, just a couple of combat jumps. Oh, I says, why, are you a jumper? She says, yeah, I've done a couple of sky jumps, sky dives, I said, well, that's entirely different. She says, you're hired. So she went and told the manager of the department that I was taking over, which was their distribution department. He went and told him that I was taking over. He was colored. And they had about, I would say, 90% of his workers that were working the hand mailing, doing the mailings, were colored. And when I went in there, they had a big mailing to do, and I saw 3 of them standing over here, 2 of them working over here, 2 of them working over there, and then 3 more standing over here. So I called them all into a room, and I told them what I was going to do and how I was going to change the method of operations as far as the mailing was concerned, and how we were going to set up a system to where it was running smoothly and we weren't going to need that many people. Well, that went over like a bomb, because right away they started coming into my office and telling me, well, you ain't going to work me to death, baby. I said, I got news for you. You're not going to be working to death. But if you don't like the system after you try it, you can walk out anytime you want to. Well, we got rid of the excess people, but the people that were working there really, hand mailing, stuffing envelopes, stamping envelopes and stuff, and this job was entirely different than the other one that I had, because in this one, you had to send prospectus to their salesmen all over the world, because public storage just covers all over the world. And my job was to make sure that they got their information that they needed, the prospectuses changed, then I had to mail them new ones. Once a year we had to have a big mailing and mail not only 1 or 2 to a certain salesman, but send him 10 sometimes, the same envelope, and had to have the correct amount of postage on them and stuff like that. So that I had to supervise all of that. And when I put it into a system where one person was doing one thing, another person was doing something else, and the other person was doing something else, they realized that their job was going to be easier, And then they were used to picking one piece here, one piece there, one piece here, and put it in the envelope. Well, while I was working in crop, they had little stands like this, pyramid, and 2 pieces of mailing that you had to do. And there was a little oil that you put you could pick up 2 at a time, you know. And when they saw that, it just, well, it was a lot easier, you know, than going this way. Got a couple of this too, a couple over here. Put them in there, stuff. So I was working like a king there, you know. And I ran their distribution department up to when I retired in '91.
Now, the last question I have for you is, if you have any advice for my generation, future generations, what would you be able to offer?
Believe it or not, the only thing that I would tell these people right now, and I would tell them to stay at school, but believe in God, because He has a mission for each one of us. Each one of us is responsible for something. We don't know what it is because He doesn't tell us right out. But in order to get ahead, right now it's even worse, that you have to get at least a college degree of some kind. And with this new technology, it's going to be harder on all of you guys to do good. But you can do it if you set your mind to doing it. It's a matter of setting a goal for yourself and not give up until you complete that, until you're satisfied. And believe me,